I kind of decided that, okay, this seems to be the future of mobile development. So I'm either going to get on board right now or get left behind.
Originally from Boston, Massachusetts, but I live in California now.
I'm from Brazil.
Nigeria.
Italy.
Sydney.
I came from China.
Jamaica.
Peru.
Now I'm living in Montreal.
The first time I wrote code in Kotlin was in 2016, and it was love first sight.
I have been using Kotlin for 3 years since I graduated from my school.
4 years. For about 2 years and a half.
Before even Google announced the support for Android.
A few years, it's hard to remember when I started.
About 2.5 years.
Conciseness draws me to the language.
It just moves out of the way and allows you to solve problems.
So you can spend a lot of time doing what is important for your application, not trying to do little pieces of boilerplate that you repeat all the time.
It's simplicity, and yet it's expressivity.
Looks like a dynamic language has the productivity of a static type language.
You can do such complex things, but not feel the complexity of it. Ergonomics and the simplicity of writing, just like it feels almost like imperative code.
I can make a lot of things with 5 lines of code that I can fully understand and explain to my colleagues.
They can immediately know, instead of scrolling through lengthy lines just to try and figure out what is the purpose of this block of code.
You can make your code look like a storybook, right?
Data classes, it provides us setters, getters, hash code equals, all those methods under the hood for us.
The simple things that matter, right?
When coroutines arrived to Kotlin, our asynchronous tasks became way easier to implement.
It is very, very easy to learn.
Pulling the best features from other languages and also improving on the ones that need to be improved.
I do see it kind of being picked up in more places, and I think that's a big credit to Kotlin multi-platform.
It can be run with Kotlin multi-platform in different environments and different platforms.
It's a language for everybody.
I think it's just going to get better.
The community is another aspect that I really love about Kotlin. Everyone is collaborative.
It's a great community to start learning new tech and learning about new languages.
And the communication between the Kotlin team, JetBrains, and the community is just so open.
Everybody is transparent. I love this. No other community has this level of transparency.
Super supportive and inspiring.
Open-minded and forward-looking.
Yeah, that's why I think I'm on the right track for using Kotlin for day-to-day development.
Evolving. Amazing.
Comfortable.
Awesome.
Exciting.
Productive.
Pretty awesome.
Thoughtful.
Amazing.
Fun.
Practical.
To sum it up, Kotlin is a set of great ideas that makes us write better quality software in many aspects. And great ideas attract great people, maybe like you.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome to the last day of our event. I'm Svetlana Isakova, developer advocate for Kotlin. I think we've already met during the first 2 days. Today, my co-host is Anton Arhipov, my colleague at JetBrains, also a developer advocate for Kotlin. Hi, Anton.
Hi. Those were a great 3 days of the event so far, indeed, and I'm excited about the last one.
So today we are presenting for you from kind of drizzling Munich in Germany and sunny Tallinn, Estonia. Right, Anton?
Yes.
Do you have sun outside? Okay.
Yes, it's sun outside.
We had quite an extensive geography during the event, including hosts, speakers, guests, and of course, participants. And we'd like to learn more about it. So please write in the chat during the whole day. You can do it. Please write what city and what country you're currently in. So to city and country.
Yes, that will be really interesting. So today we have a very interesting theme of the day. Server-side development with Kotlin. And we have presentations about Spring, Ktor, and Kotless frameworks.
Do you remember we told you that at this event, all the talks are pre-recorded? Not anymore. Today, most of the talks will be live. So we'll finally have this real-life experience of real-life event. We hope that everything works fine. And we will do it as usual. So first, we'll have a talk, and then a quick, short Q&A with the speaker. And at the end of the day, we'll have longer Q&A with all the speakers, and also with some additional guests.
Yeah, so please ask your questions in the chat. We will have a prize for the best question during the day.
And don't forget about the quizzes. It's not only about the prizes that you can win, but of course it's important who wants the prize, but also about better understanding what we're talking about. So we've prepared these quizzes especially for you. So we've prepared them for you to better grasp the content that was presented in the talks, because we had, and there is the last day ahead of us, there are really days packed with knowledge, packed with content. And of course, it's the best if you can just try the technology right after the talk. But if not, or as an addition, you can also do the quizzes, and sometimes the questions in the quizzes might require you to rewatch some parts of the talk, or even go to your DE, run the example, see what's the output. So it kind of motivates you to play more with the technology that we're covering. So don't miss them. Do the quizzes.
Nice. What can I win, actually?
I think you, Anton, actually can't win anything from the quizzes because you work at the Kotlin team. But for our participants, we have different prizes. You can win T-shirt and backpack, but we have a complicated rules who wins all these prizes. So you can check the rules. But anyway, the general idea is just we have also prizes if you just participate in the quiz. So even if you just participate, you have a chance to win something. So just look at our quizzes afterwards.
Okay, but we have actually 3 winning questions from yesterday.
Yeah, that's our another competition. So we have there are quizzes, and there are we need your questions, because all our live event depends on you asking us questions. So we then try to answer them together with our speakers. We also have prizes for the best questions. And the prize for the best question is mugs. And actually, just today I learned that we have the whole three mugs for each of the days. So we have 3 winning questions. And what are the questions for the winning questions for yesterday, Anton? Do you know? I think we have them.
Yes, we have them. The first one is actually Joseph Krupik with the question about using modules. So the question was, is there a plan of having any pure Kotlin common modules without specifying any target, and possibly publishing them and using in a platform agnostic way?
Yeah, so that was the first question. The second question was from, sorry if I read it incorrectly, Sean Rainbow. And the question was, what is the advantage of using expect actual over the existing pattern of using an interface and injecting the implementation? And this question caused lots of discussion at the yesterday Q&A session. If you missed it for some reason, you still have an opportunity to rewatch it afterwards. There are different opinions, and I would say that they came to some conclusion around this topic. So it's interesting.
Yeah, so, and the third one that we have is by Malvin Sutanto. And the question was, how do you convince the iOS developers in the company to learn or write Kotlin in order to maintain multi-platform code?
Yeah, I think that this question is just for lots of people, but we have someone who asked it again to us, and we want to give a mark to this person. So if you are one of these 3 mentioned people, please write to email kotlin1.4org at JetBrains.com. Alina will just copy it in the chat and get in touch with us saying that it was you and it was your winning question. And I think that now we can start with our main agenda. And let's start with our first talk, which is by Anton.
Me.
So see you soon. Let's enjoy the talk.
Okay, I'm ready. So welcome to the fourth day of the event, and specifically to my talk about server-side development with Kotlin. My goal today is just to give a brief overview of, using Kotlin for the server side. And I would like to share some of the information, give you some pointers to the resources or to the cases where Kotlin is used for server-side development. And well, I hope you will learn something and you will find the pointer to actually go and learn about it more. So Kotlin was actually created as an alternative to Java, meaning that it could be used everywhere where Java is used. So we know that Kotlin is very popular for Android development, but initially it was intended to be used as, as Java alternative. So it's pretty common to use it for server-side development as well. And this is what our theme is about today. When we talk about server-side development with Java, we always think of frameworks, about libraries, about the frameworks, and the interoperability with Java has been a priority for Kotlin since the beginning. And this was the crucial factor for Kotlin's success and for Kotlin's adoption for using it on the server side on the JVM. So when we develop something in Java, some web application in Java, we always think of frameworks, and there is plenty of frameworks for Java development. We know Spring is the one that is basically the most popular, the undisputed leader among Java frameworks, and there is a lot of other ones. And if we talk about Spring, in Spring Framework version 5, Kotlin has been the major theme for the improvements in the framework. They actually improved the core functionality, the core API in the framework to support Kotlin better. And Kotlin is supported among other languages in their Spring initializer project that can generate the empty projects from the beginning. Also, you can learn from Spring's website how to develop Spring applications with Kotlin. There is a tutorial. There is plenty of guides how to use Spring and Kotlin together. And Spring today is the most popular framework among Kotlin developers. Today we have Sébastien Deleuze from VMware with the talk about the state of Kotlin support in Spring. And it will be really interesting to see what's new is coming up for Kotlin in Spring. So Spring is the most popular framework, but it's not the only framework. There is plenty of others. For instance, Vertex is very popular framework among Kotlin developers. It has been multi-language framework, like a polyglot framework from the beginning, but the new frameworks like Micronaut and Quarkus are adding Kotlin support from the beginning. And other frameworks, say Vaadin and Kuba, have the extensions, the specific Kotlin extensions for Kotlin developer to use the framework more conveniently. If we go at different websites of the frameworks, for instance, Spark or Javelin, we can see that the samples in the documentation are actually duplicated side by side. You have Java and Kotlin samples side by side in their documentation. Not only we have Java frameworks that we are able to use with Kotlin, but there are frameworks that are developed with Kotlin from the ground up. So on my slide here, I have Ktor and HTTP4K, but those are not the only ones, and there's plenty. There's plenty, and we can find them on the internet. So talking about Ktor, it's actually developed by JetBrains, and it's a simplistic framework. It's designed to be lightweight, easily extendable. It's even aiming to be multi-platform. So there is a client part, which is multi-platform library today, And there are plans to make the server itself multi-platform as well. And it's taking advantage of the coroutines, of Kotlin coroutines, to enable asynchronous programming as well. To learn about Ktor and how to use it, you can actually find very nice tutorials at our play.kotlinlang.org website. In the hands-on section, you can actually find those hands-on tutorials, and those are conveniently browsable step-by-step tutorials where you can learn about Ktor and get your feeling with the framework. So a lot of frameworks are there. There is a lot more. I couldn't list every framework in my slide, but there is a nice community repository at GitHub accessible via this link, kotlin.link. And it's a collection of different libraries, frameworks, tools, maintained by the community. And there you can find pretty much any library that could be helpful for your project. Okay, this much about the frameworks. But the main question is, who actually uses Kotlin for the server side? Because if we think about Android development, Kotlin is the most popular language for developing Android applications today, and that wouldn't be that interesting if you talk, if some company is using Kotlin for Android. But it's interesting to know which companies are using Kotlin for server-side development and for services today, and what are their experience in adopting the language. So I would like to share a few cases with you that I have learned from the community. First of all, it's actually our own case. It's our own application. I couldn't get around it. JetBrains Space is the product announced last year at KotlinConf. And this is an example where Kotlin is an enabler for developer productivity, because we can share the code by using Kotlin multi-platform between different clients and services and so on. And basically, if you look at the very simplistic schema of the application, there are mobile clients, there are web clients, there is an IDE plugin, and of course there is a backend service developed with Kotlin using Ktor framework. And as I said, the enabler, okay, didn't say it yet, but we have Hadi today, who will talk about Ktor, the framework, about the inception of the project, the current state, and the future plans. So what I wanted to say about Space with Ktor and Kotlin is that the major benefit that the team acquires by using the technology is that they can share the code across clients. There's a huge amount of code shared, huge amount of common logic shared between the clients, but also between the clients and the backend. Right, and if you want to learn more about the details of the technical details of the use case, you can actually watch the presentation by Maxim Mazin from the previous Kotlin Conf, where he presented how it's technically implemented and what are the benefits. The other interesting use case we can find on the internet is the presentation by Martin Varga, the developer at Atlassian, about their developing Jira software, which is a cloud service, which is a cloud version of Jira, the famous Jira's issue tracker, with Kotlin. And you can find it at YouTube. There are slides, of course, and the technology stack looks pretty common, actually. Spring Boot framework, they are using Kotlin. They use Project Reactor for asynchronous communication. But their journey was to take the Jira application that was the huge Java monolith and start decomposing it to be able to run it in the cloud. for scalability. So they started developing new services, and they decided that they need something. They need a new language. They need a new technology, or like the updated technology stack to make the teams happier, because they wanted to work with modern tools, modern frameworks, modern programming language. And basically it comes like this. They moved from monolith to microservices. They moved from Java to Kotlin. And what they got was actually the developer happiness. And it's anecdotal evidence, as they say, but happier developer are more productive developers, right? Okay, there is another similar case actually by Expedia Group. At the previous Kotlin Conf in 2019, we had engineers from Expedia Group sharing their experience with us about creating a Kotlin library for GraphQL. And their reasoning was that Kotlin's expressiveness, strong types, null safety, ability to have data classes was actually the enabler for them, so that they could build models, the data models that match exactly how the GraphQL schema looks like. And for them, Kotlin's Java interoperability was the key feature for adopting the language. They did not decompose the service, the legacy service, before introducing Kotlin. They actually started introducing Kotlin into that existing Java application by just first introducing the data classes and then gradually converting existing Java code whenever it was reasonable. So that the video is available on our channel as well, and you can learn from there if you wish. And they have published the GraphQL library for Kotlin. There is a GitHub repository. There is documentation, presentations about it, how to use it. And since they use Spring Boot framework, they have also created a starter that conveniently configures this library in your Spring project. Another case, which is also very interesting and presents another capability of Kotlin, is Adobe Digital Experience team adopting Kotlin for high-load asynchronous services. So they published in their blog that they are switching from Java for one of the services. They are switching to Java from Java to Kotlin in order to leverage asynchronous communication by using the coroutines. The other case I want to talk about, it's not about what is the benefit here, but it's probably interesting for you if you are looking to adopt the technology, and if you are looking to adopt Kotlin, and you want to know, and if you want to know how to do that. Springer Nature, who is known for using Kotlin, they use HTTP4K framework for building their microservices. They have published a GitHub repository where they collected all kind of suggestions, basically about how to write the backend with Kotlin. And it's a living document. It's being edited. It's being updated. But, well, this is a nice resource to look at if you are looking to adopt Kotlin for backend development. There are more cases like this. There are different banks, insurance companies, startups, databases even rewritten into Kotlin. So if you Google about that, or Google any of those titles that I have here on the slide, you will easily find those. So just to recap here, Kotlin is a nice server-side language. And at JetBrains, we are using Kotlin to actually reuse the code between multiple platforms, and it has been the enabler for teams' productivity. Atlassian uses Kotlin for Jira software, and their main reasoning was the happiness of the developers. So they are living now in the brave new world of microservices with with Kotlin. Expedia adopted Kotlin for building the server-side APIs for GraphQL, and Java interoperability was the key enabler for that. Adobe is building high-load log-free software with Kotlin and by using the coroutines. So those are very nice examples. They're basically, we have the evidence in the videos, we have the evidence in the blog posts, and I hope those companies will share more of their experience as they go. But what is common here is that all those services that we talk about here today actually are running in the cloud, right? So we cannot get around the cloud. If you haven't moved to cloud today, you probably will move there tomorrow. So what's the state of Kotlin in the cloud? There are community projects. There are different platform providers supporting Kotlin for their platforms. And here I have the example, Kotlin on Google Cloud Platform. It's a community project, pretty interesting one. It was announced in spring this year. And there are plenty of examples in the GitHub repository that you can take and try to run. And if I look at those examples, I can see that some of them are actually meant to run Kotlin in a serverless environment. So serverless has experienced an immense amount of growth during the last year. And well, it's an interesting topic. And for Kotlin, there is Kotlin framework developed actually at JetBrains. And we have Vladislav Tankov today talking about this framework. And I hope that will be interesting for you to learn about how to use Kotlin and how to simplify your development and cloud deployment, specifically for serverless with Kotlin framework. So this was my short overview of Kotlin for the server side. And I hope you will enjoy the day and you will enjoy the presentations. Thank you and have a nice Kotlin.
And we are replacing Anton's presentation with me. Hello, everyone. We're back. Our hosts are back, and me and Anton. So thank you, Lord, for this very nice overview presentation. And I have a question. You've mentioned so many companies who are using Kotlin for server-side development, so many big names. And how did you find them all? And our audience might be interested how to add their company and their story to this list.
Oh, that's interesting. In the beginning of June this year, we have published a tweet from our Twitter account inviting people to share about their experience with Kotlin. And quite a few people have responded to that, about 300 people. And I have spent 2 months interviewing different companies and different projects about their experience with Kotlin. And I hope that we can invite more people now. So we invite you, and I think we will publish a link how to sign up for the interview and where to share. Yes.
If you're interested in participating in interviews or highlighting your story on our website, we'll be really happy to do that. Just get in touch with us. So we'll be happy to learn your story, like not only what you are fed of and what you find really great, but we're especially interested in the parts that annoy you, some small things like, oh, why doesn't this feature work the way I expect, or all this. So we really appreciate this feedback. And if you have something to share, just you know what to do. And I think Alina will share, or someone will share in the chat, the interview link. We've shared it several times already during this event. By the way, Anton, I found a couple of interesting questions during your talk, during your presentation. I found a couple of questions for us to discuss. So the first one from Amit. Hi, is Kotlin suitable for creating REST API service on server side? What's your answer?
Yes. It's perfect. It's really perfect for that.
There are many different frameworks.
By many different frameworks, your best bet, if you haven't ever developed a RESTful service, with Java or Kotlin before, go with Spring framework or go with the Ktor framework, take Kotlin, follow the guides, and you will be good.
Yeah, and probably at the end of the day, we'll have representative of different frameworks, so we'll probably will be able to see some better, like whether you should go with this or that framework or this framework. But let's put it off a bit. And one more question I found that interesting. The question from Anton from Anton, but from Anton Lakita this time. How do they measure the level of developers' happiness?
That's a really good one. It's a very logical one where you basically don't have any normal answer to give to the question. As they said, or their argument was for developer happiness, if the developer is happier, then he is more productive. Or like if they are more productive, then maybe they can develop faster.
So it is important. I actually don't know how to actually measure. I think there are many psychological tests,
maybe
like saying
by the width of the smile when you come to the work,
measure your happiness from. I think the formal approach will be some test that says, okay, what's your happiness from 0 to 10 this day, the day afterwards, and the day before.
Blood tests.
Yeah. Okay, that's another thing. But I think that for all the people that working in the Kotlin team, we measure developer happiness when you come to us and say how you love Kotlin during the conferences, during the event in Kotlin and Slack, and when you share your passion, and mostly when you just use the language. So whenever we see that the numbers are growing, the more folks starting to use the language, that means that we do our job well, and you're happy.
We are happy then.
And we're absolutely happy as well. That's true. So okay, spoke a bit about happiness. And of course, how we forgot about it. I think the first video that we've showed you before our broadcast, the video from you, how you shared with us your own ideas and your feelings. That's like also some example of happy Kotlin developers, happy Kotlin community.
Indeed. So we are probably ready for the next talk, right?
Yep.
All right. So in the next presentation, we will learn about Kotlin support in Spring Framework by Sébastien Deleuze. And Sébastien is the Spring framework committer at VMware. He mostly works on Kotlin and Ground native image support across Spring portfolio and on web and reactive topics. And he's the creator of Spring Foo project.
Sébastien is our old friend. He's a regular speaker at Kotlin conferences and was a part of program committee helping us to choose the best talk. So welcome, Sébastien.
Hey. Thanks.
Hello, Sébastien. Where are you connecting from?
Yeah, what's your question?
I'm from Lyon in France.
Oh, is it sunny today?
No, not that much now. That's autumn, so not very sunny, but that's fine.
I don't know why Munich is drizzling, is rainy, but Tallinn is sunny. But okay, that's
all right. So we can now move on to your presentation, and I think
we are leaving.
We are leaving with the audience, and let's enjoy the talk.
Yep. So good luck.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so let's start. So as presented by Anton, I'm Sébastien Deleuze. I'm a Spring Framework committer, and today we are going to talk about the state of Kotlin support in Spring. So Spring is by far the server-side leader on the JVM. So, a lot of people are using Spring Boot to develop web application, mostly Java developers, but an increasingly high number of Kotlin developers as well. Spring provides first-class support for both Java and Kotlin. And we have a lot of Spring Boot projects generated with Kotlin each year on start.spring.io. And since 2016, I think that was the first year of our support. Each year, there is more and more developers using Kotlin. But let's focus on Kotlin today. So if you want to start a new Spring Boot application in Kotlin, you will go on start.spring.io. You can select the Kotlin language. Typically, you will choose Gradle, but Maven is also available. Gradle is a kind of popular option when you are using Kotlin. You select the version of Spring Boot you want to use, the project metadata, and you can use any kind of dependencies. So you will typically add here the web dependency if you want to use a reactive framework, if you want to use Spring Data GPA, for example. You select all your dependencies and you click on generate. That will download a zip file with your project. You can also just explore the project directly in the web interface. That's especially useful when you want to just know the dependency coordinates for a specific dependency, and you just want to copy and paste it to your existing project. So the project that will be generated is this kind of thing. So that's a minimal Spring Boot Kotlin application. You can see that the class is annotated with Spring Boot application. The top level main function is calling run application, which is a function provided by Spring Boot to run your application. If you have selected Gradle, it will automatically generate the build file using Gradle Kotlin DSL. So Gradle was originally provided with the Groovy language, and Gradle team has added Kotlin support a few months or years ago. I think it has taken a few times to mature because basically it was a little bit slow at the beginning. It provided more Kotlin is statically typed, so it provides a better autocomplete experience, but it was a little bit resource consuming, and I'm pretty happy that the Kotlin and Gradle team has worked together. And nowadays, with Kotlin 1.4 and latest Gradle version, I think Gradle Kotlin DSL is now ready for wide usage. You can also directly generate Spring Boot application in your IDE. So the support is available in IntelliJ IDE Ultimate, Visual Studio Code, or Eclipse. So you can directly use that within your IDE. Like Anton showed, you can follow the tutorial on spring.io/guides. So it will basically explain you how to build a Spring Boot application with Kotlin using Spring MVC, Spring Data GPA, mock. It will explain how to use JUnit 5 for testing, etc. So you can really follow that. It's useful for both developers that has already an experience on Java and that already know Spring Boot, but the developers want to learn how to do that in Kotlin, or if you have not yet used Spring Boot, you can already use that and start learning how to develop. We provide Spring Framework reference documentation in Kotlin. So by default, the Java code samples are displayed, but you can click on the Kotlin tab and it will show the Kotlin version. It's not automated translation. It's really idiomatic Kotlin code. So for example, if a Kotlin extension is available as a better alternative, it will be shown. If you are using the Spring Web Flux, it will show you code samples using the coroutines API instead of the reactive one. So that's really provide you the more idiomatic Kotlin code that you can use. And I know that a few developers are using that to learn Kotlin because basically they already know how to develop in Spring Boot in Java, and they basically switch from Java to Kotlin to learn the Kotlin idiomatic way to use Spring Boot in Kotlin. So now that you have chosen Kotlin to start your next Spring Boot project, you have a few more choices to make. We provide two different web server stacks. So the question is, do you need asynchronous or reactive programming? Easy answer is no, or if you don't know what means this question, I think Spring MVC with Tomcat is a safe bet. So that's our most popular option. With that, you will use typically for persistent Spring Data GPA or Spring Data JDBC if you use a SQL database. Spring Data JDBC is a more lightweight option, and Spring Data GPA is based on Hibernate and provide much more feature and a higher level option. Yeah, and you can also use Juke if you prefer. You have also access to Spring Data, NoSQL support for Redis, MongoDB, Elasticsearch, etc. And if you want to do asynchronous or reactive programming, that means if you have to request a lot of data with latency, for example, in microservices architecture, or if you want to deal with streaming, etc., Spring Web Flux is probably a good option, and we provide a very good coroutine support. It's based on Reactor and Netty, and we provide a specific persistence with Spring Data Reactive support with coroutines API. So you can use Spring Data R2DBC. R2DBC is reactive for SQL databases, including for reactive transactions. And you can also use Spring Data Reactive, Redis, MongoDB, etc. So now that you have chosen your web stack, you have also a choice in terms of programming model. The most popular programming model, at least with Java, is annotations. So you can typically create web controllers like that with annotation like @REST controller, @request mapping. You will inject your services or repository like that, and you will typically define your web mapping with @get mapping, @post mapping annotations. And you can see that Kotlin allows you to write your code in a very concise way. And that's basically the default option. And again, if you don't know what choice you should do, just use this default option. But Kotlin is also a very nice language for functional programming. It provides some very nice DSLs. And in terms of functional construct, I think that's a very, very good language. So you can also write your web routes and various other things in a more functional way. So here, instead of using @controller, I'm using the router DSL, which is a Kotlin DSL. That will allow you to define your web mappings in this way. So basically, you will write that using DSLs, lambdas, etc., instead of using annotations. And basically, underneath, this is the same thing that can use Spring MVC and Tomcat or Spring Web Flux and Netty. So the web engine is the same. It's just another way for you to write this code. So we support both, and the choice is yours. Let's now talk about coroutines a little bit more. So I think coroutines allow you to go reactive with a great trade-off between imperative and functional programming. Coroutines are the default way to go reactive in Spring with Kotlin. Spring Web Flux really supports both reactive and coroutines API. If you choose reactive, and that's perfectly fine, you will just use Flux and Mono Reactor API like you do in Java. But we provide a very nice coroutine support that allow you to program with coroutines, and underneath that will translate to Reactor Mono or Flux. So up to you. We provide coroutine support in Spring Web Flux. As of Spring Boot 2.4 that will be released in a few weeks, we also provide coroutine support in Spring MVC, because while Spring Web Flux is natively reactive, Spring MVC provides some asynchronous programming support. So we have basically bridged coroutines with that. Spring Data Reactive provides various coroutines API, Spring Messaging with AirSocket support. We are going to talk a little bit more about that, and Spring Vault as well. So just to show you a quick code sample, if you want to use basically a web endpoint that requires some latency, so for example, if you want to request a remote data services, a remote HTTP web service, you can use for that coroutines. So you will write your handler method like usual, but you will use this suspend keyword. And that will be conceptually the same that if you are using a completable feature of or Mono, but here you can just use plain domain object like here banner without using a wrapper. So that's pretty nice. Flow is coroutines equivalent for Reactor Flux or similar Eric Java types. So that's really for streaming. And here you can see a code samples where we use web client, which is our reactive HTTP client. We provide coroutines extensions like here body to flow, and that allow you to use coroutines flow API to process server-sent event stream, for example. Let's now talk about multi-platform. Multi-platform is a pretty key design point of Kotlin, especially for recent version. It allows you to share common code across multiple platforms and to refine this code for specific needs. So Kotlin JVM is used on server side and Android. Kotlin JS is a kind of equivalent for TypeScript or JavaScript, and Kotlin native is mostly used for iOS deployment. What is nice with this multi-platform angle is that Kotlin libraries leverage it. So we have coroutines that is a multi-platform library, and also this new Kotlin serialization library, which is a Kotlin multi-platform reflectionless serialization that supports multiple formats, so JSON, protobuf, etc. And I have a good news for you. As of Spring Boot 2.4 that will be released shortly, we provide support for Kotlin serialization out of the box in Spring MVC and Spring Webflux. That's a more lightweight alternative than Jackson. It's designed for Kotlin. It provides multi-platform serialization. And that allows you basically to share some code for model and validation across server, front-end, and mobile. And if you want to use it, just exclude Spring Boot Starter JSON because that will add Jackson to the class path and add the Kotlin serialization dependency. And if you have Kotlin serialization and not Jackson on the class path, Spring Boot will automatically configure Kotlin serialization for JSON support. We only support JSON support for now because this is the only stable format supported. More format will be supported later. And that's pretty exciting because that allows you to basically write your model in, for example, with Kotlin data classes that are multi-platform, and to share it between the server, the mobile application developed in Android, for example, and the front end developed with Kotlin.js. Kotlin.js has been here for quite a while, and I think it was a little bit too young, and I tried to use it previously, but it was kind of difficult. And the good news is that with Kotlin 1.4, there is a new JS IR backend and generally big improvements in Kotlin.js that are really super promising. It's still alpha stability, but this kind of reboot of Kotlin.js has the potential to really be a competitor for TypeScript, for example. And today, I think I will just experiment with it, but next year, I think it will be ready for production usage, and I think it has a huge future. Even more promising, Kotlin WASM. So WASM, WebAssembly, is the bytecode of the web. It's already supported in your browser, but without the big garbage collector support. So that's basically for now a target for C, C++, and Rust development. But garbage collector support is coming, and that will make WASM a very nice target for Kotlin for front-end development. And it could be in the future an even better platform than Kotlin.js. And I really believe in this WebAssembly target for the future. Let's now talk about AirSocket. So AirSocket is reactive messaging. So it shares characteristic with other messaging software protocols, but it's allowed to deal with back pressure over the network. Back pressure is a feature highlighted in reactive streams. It allows basically to communicate together a fast producer with a slow consumer or the opposite. And previously, we had only a way to deal with that inside the JVM, and AirSockets provide a way to deal with that across the network, and that's used by very big players like Facebook. So that's production ready, battle tested in production. It's agnostic in terms of transport, so you can use AirSocket on top of TCP in addition to HTTP, and other protocols are supported. It's multi-platform, so I think that's a good fit with Kotlin. There are implementation in Java, Kotlin, JavaScript, C++, Go.NET, Python. And yeah, I think that's a pretty exciting protocol. We support it in Spring messaging, so you can use AirSocket Request Builder to basically create AirSocket requester, and that's allow you to receive or to send reactive messages. We have CBOR serialization by default, so pretty efficient binary serialization, and we have full coroutines support for that. So in these code samples, we are merging 2 streams of messages into a single one, and we broadcast it into multiple clients, mobile, front-end, etc. And the most exciting thing about AirSocket support is that the AirSocket Kotlin project has been recently rebooted to be fully multi-platform and based on coroutines. So it's still a little bit early. So feel free to test, provide feedback to the project maintainers. But I really think AirSocket implementation in Kotlin multi-platform with coroutines API would be very interesting, especially for Android and iOS. Let's talk about the other key points. So Spring Framework API has 100% of its API with null safety annotations. That means that from a Kotlin point of view, even if Spring Framework is written in Java, all the API are null safe, so no null pointer exception with Spring application written in Kotlin. We have, as of Spring Boot 2.3, support for Kotlin data classes with val properties with this add constructor binding annotation, so feel free to use it. And we have a new Kotlin DSL in Spring Security 5.4 that will basically provide you the same capabilities than Spring Security Java DSL, but in a much more concise way, and you have access to all the API of Spring Security with a pure Kotlin DSL, so I think that's pretty exciting. Let's now talk about Spring Boot native applications with GraalVM native. So you may have heard about GraalVM. GraalVM is a project started several years ago by Oracle. It allows, among other things, to compile JVM applications, so typically Spring Boot application written in Java or Kotlin, so with Kotlin JVM here, not Kotlin native, Kotlin JVM, into a native executable that can run without a JVM. And that's pretty interesting because this native executable can start instantly and consume less memory than the JVM equivalent. We use Paketo build packs, which is build packs for containers directly integrated into Spring Boot to build lightweight container image. I will show you a demo just after. So this native, GraalVM native is an interesting platform, but we need to keep in mind that it offers different trade-offs compared to the JVM. So while it has instant startup and low memory footprints, with the same amount of resources, it could be faster than native. Its JVM is more mature, and native compilation takes longer, typically multiple minutes for a real-life Spring Boot application. But the interesting thing are instant startup and cheaper hosting possible. If you check these two graphs of benchmarks, at the left, you have the Spring Boot application on the JVM. You can see that it starts in around 1 second and consumes 200 megabytes of memory. And after, we basically do a load test with a lot of concurrent requests. At the right, you have the same application, but compiled into a native executable. So you can see that it starts instantly, almost instantly. And you can see that it uses 4 times less resources to provide the same level of performance. So that's something pretty interesting because instant startup allow you to have high availability without running in parallel 2 instances. So that's cheaper. That's also cheaper because on AWS, Google Cloud Platform, or Microsoft Azure, you can choose a smaller instance, and the same thing for VMware virtualization. So it's basically allow you to run the same application unchanged with a smaller footprint. In terms of support, we have been collaborating a lot with the GraalVM team to fix and improve GraalVM because it was only implementing partially the Java platform, and now we are in a much more better shape. So thanks to the GraalVM team for their help on that. Currently, we have incubating support in Spring GraalVM native plugin. It's based on Spring Boot 2.4, and you can already try it for now. We will start our beta support in December this year. So yeah, that will be a very important step. And we have already started to work on first-class support in Spring Boot 3. And Spring Boot 3, when it will be released, will support native executable out of the box. I'm now going to do a quick demo. So here we have a Kotlin project, a Spring Boot Kotlin project. So I can show you, this is a typical Spring MVC plus Tomcat plus Jackson application using annotations, okay? simple REST endpoint. And I'm going also to show you that we have a typical Gradle configuration. The only thing that I have changed is that I'm using Spring Boot 2.4, okay, because GraalVM Native requires Spring Boot 2.4. And also I have customized here the configuration of the capability of Spring Boot to create a container image available as of Spring Boot 2.3 in order to say I want to use a Tiny OS base layer. I want to enable native image support, and here I'm just providing a few additional parameters that are useful for optimization. And then I'm just building a container image with Gradle or Maven support. Maven support is available as well to build container image. Here I'm going to reuse the previous build, but in practice, if I had to do some code changes, it will take more time. And it will basically start a container, run a GraalVM native image compiler inside this container, create the native executable, and publish it into a container image used locally. We can have a deeper look to what is in this container image, and you can see that it is composed of an OS base layer of less than 20 megabytes. It's basically a very tiny Ubuntu-based distribution consisting of only 7 packages optimized for security and size. And you can see that my application, so this is my Spring Boot application, is close to 50 megabytes, and we will continue to improve even more this size. So you can see that we have a very lightweight container image consisting of about 20 megabytes for the OS and 50 megabytes for the Spring Boot application. And then if I want to run it, I'm going to just to show you the Docker Compose file. So here I'm just specify the port that I will use and the reference of my container image. And then I'm running my application. So you can see that it's starting almost instantly. And even on bigger application, we have PetClinic that starts in 100 milliseconds. So that's pretty interesting. That provides some kind of serverless capabilities. But with existing application, you don't have to change all your programming model, and I think that's a pretty promising platform. Okay, so let's continue the presentation. The last section of my talk is about what's next. So we are really going to show some R&D topic not available right now for production usage, but pretty exciting still. So that's programmatic configuration for Spring Boot using a Kotlin DSL. And that's part of the Spring Foo project I created a few years ago now. So Spring Foo is an incubator for a functional flavor of Spring Boot. You have seen that we can use some functional construct with Spring Boot, but it's still mainly based on annotations. So Spring Foo is really about using Kotlin DSLs and functional constructs everywhere. There is 2 DSLs provided, Kofu and Jafu. Kofu is for Kotlin functional DSL, Jafu is the Java version. But here I will only show the best DSL, which is the Kotlin one. So typically, with the Spring Boot application configured with Spring Boot, you keep the same start.spring.io to start your project. It's still based on the Spring Boot infrastructure. You still have dependency management, starters, actuators, and standalone executable jar or container deployment. But what changed are basically with Spring Boot regular flavor, you have conventions and automatic configuration. So that's pretty handy, but sometimes there is some mismatch between what you expect and what happens. In Spring Foo, everything is declared explicitly. Spring Boot regular flavor is mainly annotation-based, while Spring Foo flavor is mainly using DSLs and functional constructs. Spring Boot regular flavor is mostly reflection-based, while Spring Foo is Lambda-based infrastructure, and Spring Boot is production-ready, while the Spring Foo flavor is still incubating. So in terms of code, that's look like that. You have a DSL that allows you to declare your beans, to declare that you want to use Spring MVC, and you can basically discover everything using autocomplete. So that's pretty discoverable. You can use functional and programmatic construct like for defining the ports, depending on some conditions. You can defining your routes with the same web router that I have shown previously. And while on Spring Boot regular flavor, the converters are basically created automatically depending on the class path. Here, you will have to declare explicitly that you want to use Jackson and that you want to have pretty print of your JSON output. And the good thing about that is that you will only load in memory what you use, while in Spring Boot regular flavor, I think you will typically have some unwanted features running. So here is the few links. So start.spring.io to start a new project, the tutorial, and the two links to SpringWell VM Native and Spring Foo experimental project. So SpringWell VM Native is incubating, and the native support will be available in Spring Boot 3, but you can already start using it right now. And Spring Foo is an experimental project. Okay, I think we are done.
And we are back. Thank you, Sebastian, for amazing presentation about Spring. So while you were talking, we tried to carefully pick up the questions for you from the stream. So the first question that I want to ask is from I don't know. There's so I it's words like, will there be anything to help to go from Spring to Spring Foo? And how will be this conversion process?
So for now, there is no automatic conversion of your application, but we have some kind of automated translation process. I mean, I can explain a little bit. Currently, Spring Boot configurations are defined with annotations, and we are currently working on some automated translation process to convert Spring Boot annotation-based configuration into functional configuration. So that's not directly to convert your application. It's mainly to basically automatically use Spring Boot configuration for all what is supported on Spring Boot side, because currently on Spring Foo, we only support a subset of that. So that's basically to increase the maintainability of Spring Foo and increase the scope of the features that we support. We don't currently plan to have an automated translation because I'm not sure how idiomatic the output will be. That may be an idea to explore. We don't have that in the radar yet. So yeah, our focus is mainly to have the same scope of libraries and features supported than the regular Spring Boot, and have that in a maintainable way. And after that, maybe we will cover other topic.
Thank you. Makes sense.
All right. We have another question regarding web client. So it's from Renaud, and he's asking if they're writing Spring Boot microservices with Kotlin, should they use web client even though they are not using reactive programming?
Yeah, I think I would say yes. So our historical web client is REST template. REST template is mostly based on a blocking infrastructure, and that's usually fine. But if you use a lot remote web services, microservices architecture, and if you want to be immune to latency, I think that's a good idea to use web client. But web client is also a more modern style of API. That basically Fluent API. It have both blocking, reactive, and coroutine support. And as you have seen, we now have coroutine support in Spring MVC. So even in Spring MVC, you can now use suspending function, etc. So I would say that nowadays, a web client is probably a good option for everybody, whatever you are using Spring MVC or Spring Webflux.
Thank you. The next question, I don't know how to write this name. Mcdemus. MC Demus. Okay, probably. Question regarding JVM static and bin combination. Currently, it seems not to work with Kotlin. Is there anything to make this, probably some hacks to make this work right now, or plan to make this possible? I don't know whether you are the right person to ask this question, but probably you can comment. Probably you know something about it, or we can postpone it to ask for the Kotlin team.
I'm not sure. Could you repeat the beginning of the question?
JVM static bin. There are two annotations, and then you should click and So
yeah, no, I'm not sure. That's maybe a question more for Kotlin team.
Okay, then we will redirect it to some one from the Kotlin team.
Okay, I will actually ask one more question here. You know gRPC library, and they actually support Kotlin as well. So there was a question regarding gRPC support for Spring Boot, if there are any plans to do that.
So there is the gRPC support for Spring Boot exists. It's not directly integrated into Spring Boot starters that we provide by default, because we don't really much added value from a programming model perspective to add such support. But I think the support available in the community is pretty great, and that's perfectly fine. So I think it depends about what technology we integrate. We need to have some added value to add. So for example, currently we are working on some GraphQL improved support, and other technology also will be integrated. For gRPC, we just think that the existing support is pretty fine, and also that RSocket is maybe an alternative that fits better in Spring, especially with Kotlin in Spring programming model. So that's why we just use the community-driven support for now.
I see.
There is one more question from Taylor. What would be the main benefits for, I think, in the context of Spring, for moving to Kotlin serialization, Jason?
So I think the advantages for moving from Jackson to Kotlin serialization are, I think the footprint is more lightweight. I need to measure that more precisely, but I think the footprint is more lightweight. The multi-platform support is really a key one for me, because basically I think we don't use a lot the multi-platform capabilities for now on Kotlin server-side development in Spring or in other frameworks, and I really think there is a lot of power in using that, especially where you are developing your backend with Spring Boot, and then you are developing your Android mobile application, or maybe the iOS one with Kotlin. And hopefully, like I said, Kotlin.js has improved a lot these days, and I really expect it to be production ready and a real competitor to TypeScript this year or next year. So being able to share your model, your validations, and more code between all those platforms really look like to me a key features for this Kotlin serialization support.
Yeah, we totally agree with your what you said in terms of it becoming the multi-platform ways to do things. Okay.
All
More
right.
questions, Anton?
So yeah, we have a question regarding GraalVM native image support. So is there like a performance difference when you're compiling Kotlin Spring Boot to native image, or compared to Java Spring Boot to native image?
No, that's basically the same. Kotlin has been designed, as you know, for efficient mobile support. And it is statically typed. So one of the key points with GraalVM native is that there is a static analysis of your application from the main entry point, and every part of your code that is not explicitly used will be removed. So while for dynamic languages, I think the support for GraalVM native is pretty hard, for Kotlin, we have basically the same compilation time, the same level of support than with Java. So that's pretty good fit. And a very important point for the future is, I think that the Kotlin mindset in terms of using more compiler plugin to do more work during the compilation is a very, very good fit with GraalVM native. So I really expect that that basically Kotlin compiler plugin and multi-platform aspects will become key advantages when it comes to deploying a GraalVM native application.
Okay, thank you for the answer. And I think that I will have the last question because there is already the next talk. And this last question is from Flurux, which Kotlin features have been the most helpful in creating a better Spring development experience? Lambdas with receivers, explicit nullable types, something else?
I think I will vote for null safety, because basically we have been in a process on annotating all Spring Framework code base with null safety annotation in order to. The first goal was to make the API null safe from a Kotlin point of view, but we did a lot of improvement and fixes on Spring Framework because the null safety was basically implicit, so we had to read the Java doc or watch the implementation, and we did a lot of fine-tuning, and we really improved the quality of Spring Framework code base, including for Java developers. So this
so it's like the additional benefits.
Yeah, exactly.
You do it for Kotlin, but then it also works for Java, and you have all this.
Exactly. So I think Kotlin has been also a source of inspiration to improve Spring Framework on various aspects, in addition for Java developers. So that was a pretty long journey to annotate all the code base, but a lot of added value.
Thank you so much for your answers.
Okay,
All right.
my pleasure.
So thank you very much, Sebastian, and we are going to move to the next talk now. And see you soon.
Yeah, so thank you. So I hope that Sebastian will join us during the big Q&A session. So stay tuned, and we'll have more questions for him to answer and for all other speakers. By the way, don't forget to share your city and country if you haven't already done so. We'll need it. So if you have done it, no problem. But if you haven't, if you joined a bit later, just share in the chat what country and city you're currently in. Okay, now talking about our next speaker. I don't think I need to introduce him, actually. Everyone knows Hadi. He's good not only at programming, but at startup comedy as well. Hadi is the lead developer advocate at JetBrains. He has been advocating Kotlin at Ktor for so many years. So he's now also team lead for Ktor. And also he's a person who taught me how to pronounce Ktor correctly. For all the Russian speakers in our audience, Ktor is wrong. You should say Ktor. So welcome, Hadi.
Thank you, Sveta.
Hello, Hadi.
Hi, Hadi.
Hello. How are you both doing?
You see, we are hosting this event. We have to be prepared to introduce you and so on and so forth. So
can I borrow that bio, because it's way nicer than mine. I also like the whole part about the stand-up comedy. So
nice. Okay. So you should share with our audience. I think we know it, but probably someone doesn't yet know. City and country you're currently in.
City and country. I'm from Malaga, Spain.
Yeah, so it's not where you're from, it's just like currently. So we need this data. Yeah. Someone in the backstage collected this data right now.
Exactly. So, well, you know where the country in Europe where the worst is happening right now with COVID-19, that's where I'm from.
Okay.
I'm trying to get
we wanted not to mention some of this, but it's.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I?
No problem. It's fair. It's truth of our contemporary world, so we shouldn't just silent it. So I think that so now, Hadi, time is yours. Audience is yours. Use it. Use this time wisely. So, and we see you soon.
Thank you. I especially like to use it time wisely, as if generally I don't. But it's okay. I will take that as words of inspiration. But anyway, thank you, and welcome everyone to this talk on Ktor, otherwise pronounced Ktor. In fact, if you're wondering where Ktor comes from, it comes from the idea of constructor. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction on the past of Ktor, the present, and then I'll show you a little bit Ktor, and then I'll talk to you briefly about the future of Ktor. So let's start with why Ktor, or what is Ktor? It's an OSS framework that is used for creating server and client applications. So whether you're creating server-side applications, HTTP endpoints, REST and services, or you want to do client developments like talking to HTTP or sockets, you can use Ktor for that. And it's multi-platform with a star, except I didn't put the star. But the point being that right now the multi-platform part is client-side. On the server side, we're working to provide it on a multi-platform as well, not only on the JVM, but also on native and JavaScript eventually. To give you a little bit of history, let's first take a look at the frameworks that existed for Kotlin when it came to web development. So obviously at the time, Sébastien has just covered Spring, and Spring has always been around, and they started to create wrappers for Kotlin and endpoints for Kotlin, but as a JVM framework, you could always use Spring. But there was an initiative by a gentleman from an external company at some point to create Kara. And if you're not familiar with Kara, it's a Ruby on Rails for Kotlin, essentially. If you're not familiar with Ruby on Rails and you know a little bit .NET, it's ASP.NET MVC essentially, or Grails in the JVM world. And then there was another framework called Wasabi, which was an attempt to do kind of like Express.js for Kotlin. Now, Wasabi was by myself, which I eventually deprecated to continue work and efforts on Ktor. And the interesting fact right now is that the Kara, which is kind of like the Ruby on Rails aspect, as I mentioned, there is now a framework that is trying to implement Kara, but on Ktor. So we've come full circle with this. So Ktor in itself was initiated by Ilya Ryzhenkov, one of my colleagues that used to lead the ReSharper team, and then now is working as a product manager on Space. And it was inspired by Kara and Wasabi. And apart from being a framework itself, it served multiple purposes. One of them was to explore Kotlin as a DSL tool, to see where we could take it and how we could define things using Kotlin. Base library usage, so some of the other libraries that we're working on, especially around multi-platform, have a playground and place to use it, and of course coroutines. And Ktor is built from the ground up now using coroutines, so it's all embedded from the very core. So Ktor caught on. It started to be used externally. It also started to be used internally. Space, which is our collaboration IDE, collaboration integration team product, had decided to go with Ktor as well. And we had multiple internal projects that started using it. So it started to also get external contributions, otherwise known as pull requests. And there was a problem. And the problem was that we started to get all of these pull requests. We started to get all of these issues. We started to get questions tagged on Stack Overflow, and 2,000 plus people on the Slack channel on Kotlin Slack. And the minor issue there was that there were really just two quote unquote part-time developers on Ktor. And when I talk about part-time, it's not that they were literally part-time on Ktor, but Ktor right now has things that eventually may not belong in Ktor, but just are auxiliary libraries that are used in the multi-platform part. So they were developing these libraries and also Ktor. So that brings us to today. And we have quadrupled our team size. Now that sounds way better than me saying we now have 8 people on the team, right? If I just say we quadrupled our team size and you didn't pick up on the fact that it was initially 2 people, it sounds fantastic. But we've got more developers, we've got a support engineer, we have marketing, we have developer advocacy. There's a whole bunch of people now that are working, technical writers, etc. So this is going to allow us to move much, much faster. And some of the changes that we've already made, we've got a new site, we've got a new blog, and we've got a new Twitter account. Now, if the Twitter account is the main thing that stops you ever from adopting a new technology, you can now safely adopt JetBrains Ktor because it's going to be around. We have moved to semantic versioning. And the reason for this is to give our users, our customers, better insight into any potential breaking changes. We have also committed to 3 major minor releases a year. And in addition to that, we will be releasing monthly patches. One of the things that many users of Ktor complained about was that our release process was very, very infrequent. So we are now committed to making patch releases with fixes and then 3 major/minor releases per year. And obviously, to the extent possible, keep any breaking changes to the minimum And if we do have breaking changes, we will be introducing a deprecation cycle. So if you're familiar with what Kotlin does, in that it says that in the next iteration, for instance, this API or this what have you will be deprecated, we will be doing something similar, issuing you a warning, and then in the next one, issuing you actual compiler error. So that gives you a little bit of history of what Ktor, how it initiated, what it was, where it came from. And let's take a look at Ktor a little bit on the server and how you can play with it. So here is essentially your hello world or hello Ktor application. And you can see that it's encapsulated in a console application for a Kotlin console application. So let's examine all of the different parts. We have here the server, which we are launching an embedded server. And the embedded server can use different engines such as Netty, Jetty, Tomcat, a bunch of different ones, including CIO, which stands for Coroutines IO, which is currently experimental, but that is the direction that we're taking to be able to provide multi-platform Ktor on the server. So in this case, we're using Netty, and we're saying we're going to start the server on port 8080. Now, once we do that, we then define a route. So this is part of the whole DSL aspect that I was talking about with Kotlin. And what we're doing here is saying we're going to define a new route or route, depending on where you're from. And inside that, we're going to define a single route, which is get on the homepage. So in this case, /get. And when someone makes the call to that, we are essentially going to respond with hello Ktor and set the content type to text plain. So that is essentially it. If we were to run this, it will open up in the browser, which we'll see shortly, and basically respond with hello Ktor. Now, a Ktor application can consist of multiple modules. And each of these modules is really up to you on how you want to define them. It can be, for example, a group of similar functionality in your application. Let's say, for instance, you have an ERP system and you want to group things by administrative tasks and planned floor tasks or what have you. You could define these as modules. You can define modules as individual aspects of your application, such as, for example, a customer module, orders module. It's completely up to you. Or you can have your entire application in a single module. It is just basically a way for you to group your application the way you want. You don't have to necessarily use it. Inside these modules, each module then has the Ktor application itself. So you have the pipeline where you make a request. It goes through a routing mechanism. It then passes that request over to your application logic, which is where you're doing all of your computation, you're doing all of your storage, reading, writing, what have you, and then you send out a response. Very simple and straightforward. Now, Ktor also has this concept of a feature, which you may be familiar with in other technologies, often referred to as an interceptor or middleware or filter, depending on your background and the other framework that you've used. And these features can be placed pretty much everywhere. They can be placed before request, after request, before processing, another request. Anywhere that you can think of, you can place these features. And then these features could be different things. So for instance, you can have an encoding, you can have compression, and even routing itself is a feature, which basically comes quote unquote out of the box, in that we essentially feel that any Ktor application needs routing. But under the covers, routing itself is essentially a feature too. So let's switch over to some code and let's take a look at demos, and then we'll come back and look at some sites. So here I've got a series of applications. Now, this main function is a little bit different to what I just showed you previously. In this case, what we have is we're saying that instead of defining the actual Ktor application and the routing inside the main function, what I'm saying is just essentially load an engine of type Netty and read the arguments for the configuration of that through the arguments passed in the command line. And if I do not pass any arguments in the command line, it is going to default and try and find what's called the application configuration file, which we have over here. And this is where I define my port and I define the different modules that my application consists of. And as I mentioned, you can have multiple modules. In my case, I'm just going to have a single module for each demo, and then I'll just comment the one that we're going to be using. So this then takes me to the actual module itself. And if I go to this module, which in this case would be simple KT, we can see that there is the similar code that we saw before without the embedded server. That part has been done over here. Now, the reason for this is that generally, this is how you would have your production time application, right? You would have a application.com file where you define the parameters, meaning that you don't need to recompile your application if you want to change a port or something like that. So here I essentially have my routing. I do my hello world content type text plain. And then for me to run this, I come to my application and hit run. And this should load up the module, which is the simple KT. So this is going to compile the application and then open it up in the browser. So let's just build the project. And we're running it, and we see that it's saying it's responding at 008080, and there we have our hello world. Okay, very simple. And if we take a look at the source page, there's not much other than just hello world. So let's see what else we can do with Ktor. Now, one thing that Ktor already comes with out of the box is support for static pages. So if I want to load some static pages, all I have to do is just specify the resource and where those files are. So in this case, what I'm saying is that anything that's under the URL static is going to be static. That means it has to physically be on the file, on the disk, and that could be a resource that is physically there, a file, or for instance, read it from an actual resource file. So in this case, I'm saying that anything that is static has to be located in the folder static, which we have up here, and I have a logo of Ktor. Now, if we run this application, so notice that the only thing I've changed is just commented out the modules and run the new module. We come back and we still run the same application, and it loads quite fast. We open it up. Now that gives me an error as expected because there is nothing listening on that URL. But if I do static Ktor logo.svg, I will get an error because I don't know how to spell. So if I do static, then I get my logo. Okay, so just basically adding this functionality of static allows us to have different static resources on our file. Now let's dive into how we can combine this with some other libraries that are provided by Kotlin. So some of you may be familiar with Kotlin X HTML, otherwise known as using Kotlin to define HTML. Sometimes when I show this to people, they cringe and they kind of like go, "This is completely and utterly wrong. What are you doing? Why are you writing, HTML inside Kotlin code? You shouldn't be doing this." And I say, yes, okay, and please show me your React application, right? JSX is essentially the same thing. Here I get nice static typing. So I can write body, I can write H2 and get all of my code completion, etc. And we can combine this easily with Ktor. So again, if I run my application, I can see that now, in this case, what I'm saying is that if I access the HTML DSL route, that's going to give me some HTML. So we come here, paste that, and we can see that we get our HTML. And we get nice, clean HTML, right? There is nothing there. There's no 6,000 lines of JavaScript and 200,000 lines of CSS and jQuery and everything else that you could potentially think of that you could drag into your web application just to have a bullet list of items. Like the good old days when we actually used to write pure HTML. So you have support for that as well. So let's all go over and see something a little bit more quote unquote complicated, which is posting information. So right now we've seen how to do a get. And the get essentially is just defining what the response is. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm doing a little get that is going to return a form which has two fields. One is of type input and the other one is of type file. and then I have a post section which is going to receive that form and process it. So you can see here that already Ktor has support for multi-part form data. So I can see that if the call is receive a multi-part, if it is of type multi-part, then I can go through the items of the multi-part form and process each one individually. So if it's a field, I can say that I can access the value. If it's a file, I can access the file name, the content type, etc. So if we were to run this and open it up, and we have the home page basically giving us the form where we can choose a file. For instance, let's say desktop over here, and I can say ticket, and I'll say an example and send, and that tells me exactly the input field that I sent, as well as the name of the file and the content type. So out of the box, again, we have support for multi-part form and, of course, all of the different verbs of Ktor. Now, let's take a look at some of these features that we've been talking about. In fact, we're going to now, we've used already one, which is routing, but let's take a look at some other features. So in order to use a feature in Ktor has two parts. It has the installation, initialization phase of the feature, and then it has the actual usage of it. So in this case, we have the installation and initialization, which is empty, but in a moment, I'll show you a feature that actually does have some initialization. But in this case, it's empty, and it's just saying add default header support. So when I add default header support, it's going to add some default headers to every request response, which is the time, etc. So all I need to do is say install the feature. And then this part is something we've already seen, which is get headers, respond, check the headers, etc. So let's run this one over here. And now if we access headers, and let's open up the tools so that we can see this. When we access headers, it says check the headers, and we'll go to elements, and we see that the headers is giving me back the actual values. Let's see, why isn't it headers over here? It's seeing that I'm getting some additional headers back, such as the date, etc. So this is just adding default headers, and of course I can add as many headers as I want to my request. But the point here being, this is how simple it is to actually add a feature, use it inside Ktor. Now let's see something a little bit more advanced, so to speak. Nothing advanced, but a little bit prettier, or something that is more useful. So if we go to JSON, what I'm doing here is I'm adding content negotiation. So essentially what this means is that Ktor adds support, the ability for us to send back data in different formats in encoding. So I can send back JSON, I can send back XML, different types of serialization that I have. And in addition, it's adding support for content negotiation. Now, content negotiation, for those not familiar, is the idea that the client is requesting a certain content type, for example, JavaScript/JSON or text/XML, and the server is responding with that content. But beyond responding, it also needs to negotiate. That means that if the client requests 3 different formats and the server cannot serve those, it should say that it cannot serve that type of content, or it should fall back to the ones that the client accepts and it can serve. So by installing this content negotiation, it is providing this for us. And then the JSON here is that initialization part that I was talking about that some features have, which in this case, I'm saying I'm using JSON for serialization, and I'm setting some properties of JSON, which in the case of JSON itself is set pretty printing or serialized null. Now, when I make a request to customer, all I do is just respond with the model. I'm not doing anything in terms of serialization myself. I'm just taking the data class, and the customer is essentially a data class. In this case, it's not even a data class, just a class, and I am responding with it. So if we run this and access customer, we can see that we get our JSON back. Now, if we take a look at the headers, customer and headers. The content negotiation that I'm talking about is this part over here. We can see that we have an accept, and the accept has different Q parameters, which is essentially saying what is the weight of that. So the default weight is 1.0, so it's going to try and find the ones that are of type, for example, application JSON or application XML, and if it cannot, it will fall back to the other ones. These are the types that it accepts and the types that the server will then respond with. So that process of negotiating the type of content is also being done for you. This isn't just about serializing the output in a specific format. And all we do again is just install a feature. Now we have many other features. For example, we have authentication, custom features, routing app, etc. So for instance, if we take a quick look at authentication, let's see what we have here. Here we can have basic authentication, we can have OAuth. In this case, I'm just showing you basic authentication. And essentially what we do again is first install a feature, then initialize it. And here I'm saying that I want to provide basic authentication. Basic authentication has a realm. In this case, I'm calling it auth sample. And then I'm passing in a validation, which is actually going to validate the code, which obviously you don't do this kind of thing in production. And you have the ability to set ID principal, user ID principal, which then can be used throughout the session. So running this, it's essentially going to now allow me, when I access anything that is under the authenticate auth segment, which is what's defined over here, is going to be authenticated. Anything that is not under that segment won't be. So the home page will not be. But if I try and go to /secure, it's going to prompt up basic authentication. So if I type secure, ABC, ABC, and then I get access to that secure resource. So this is just an example of using authentication with basic, but as I mentioned, there are other types of authentication. Now, the custom feature is very simple, simple to implement, although we're trying to simplify that even more. But you do essentially have to implement a specific class. However, it does require you to know a little bit more about the internals. And for 80% of the cases, that's not necessary, and that's something that we're working on to improve. But looking at kind of like a bigger application, how would we actually work with Ktor in larger applications? So this is one thing that is somehow different with Ktor in comparison to some other frameworks, in that we're not really strict in how you want to structure your application. I mean, right now, every application sample that we have seen that I've essentially created routes directly in a function, and I'm basically loading that. So even in the case where I had a post, I had a get and a post here. Now, obviously, that's fine for demo purposes, but you don't want to have your application with one big routing table with all of the contents. So you could just create a routing table and have each of these point to a function. Ultimately, at the end of the day, these are all lambdas. But there's different ways also that you can do this. So one way, for example, is to structure your application using extension functions. So for instance, I could have a function called home and put that function home in its own file, and then have all of the routes associated with that in that file called home controller, home or customer or what have you. I could have these in different files. I could even have a class. I could even have a class that I would call home controller and then have the routes defined in that class home controller. You have complete flexibility in how you want to structure your application. And then you can, there's some styles or conventions that people use. One of these is, for instance, grouping applications by packages, etc. I actually wrote a long blog post, which is also available on the Ktor website, on the benefits and disadvantages of the different ways you can group your application structure. So if you're interested in that, you can look that up on the website. And this is basically now how you can structure your routes, but also what's important is that in Ktor, you can have nested routes. So for instance, here, instead of having get, about, and then a post, about, and so on and so forth, and all the different verbs like delete. I could also do delete, about, etc. I think many of us would like to do a delete of about of a company page. But anyway, what I could also do is a nested routing. So I could say, for example, everything under employee and then define the different verbs. So I could do get, post, delete, etc. Okay. So how you want to structure your application really depends on you and the benefits and disadvantages of each side. As I mentioned, you can take a look at some of the blog posts that I wrote on the website. So that's basically an overview of Ktor. And now let's just finish off with some plans on what we're doing in the future. So back to the slides a second. So what lies ahead? We're improving the onboarding experience. And this doesn't mean only documentation, but we're also making it easier for people to start with an application. I mean, now you can go to if you're using IntelliJ, there's a plugin. You can also go to start.ktor.io, but we're making that even better. We're also improving the development lifecycle experience. So we're improving everything to do with testing, with deployment, with all of the different phases of development of your Ktor application. We are working on better tooling, better documentation, better guides, etc. In terms of client-server, one of the things that you can use Ktor for is, as I mentioned, client and server development, connected systems, or if you will, microservices. And while the client is there, we want to provide more functionality and more features to have that parity with the server so that it can communicate much better. The extensibility, as I mentioned, it's essentially, if you want to extend Ktor, you just implement a class for a feature. However, we're making that even simpler so that for the majority of the cases, you don't need to know the ins and outs of Ktor and simply define your feature. We're being more attentive to performance. Generally, the performance is good. However, we notice that a lot of people take a notice of certain websites, such as, for example, test benchmarks, and we're not up to date on our tests there. And we're going to make sure that we try and be more up to date there and show the actual values aligned with each release. And of course, if there are performance issues, also work on improving those. And revamping the documentation. So one of the major complaints that we received around Ktor was that the documentation was out of date, sometimes lacking. Sometimes you would copy a code sample and it wouldn't compile. We are completely revamping that. What you see right now on the website isn't that documentation. We've launched a new website with some new design. We've imported the existing documentation, but we are working on new ones, and all of the samples are embedded and they're compiled and they're checked. And that means that every release and every documentation that is published will be made sure that it actually works. So if you have a copy and paste some code, it's going to be working for you properly. And last but not least, we are improving the tooling. We want to provide excellent tooling support, and we're going to be revamping the kind of like community contributed plugin that there was for Ktor. We're going to provide top-notch new tooling, not only in the wizard, but also in the onboarding, adding features, navigation, code analysis, etc. And that's going to be available in IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate. So if you would like to find out more, please visit ktor.io. As I said, we've got a brand new website. It looks great. And hopefully any updates will be there soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Hadi, so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
For this Q&A session, we also wanted to invite another person, Leonid Stashevsky, who is a technical lead for Ktor. So I don't know how we distinguish this team lead, technical lead. Probably it's not a question to discuss now, but we have you both now, so you both can answer our tricky questions. And
yes.
our first,
here's how you can introduce us. Every question you ask me, I will redirect to Leonid. So there you go. That's how you introduce us.
Okay, probably not everyone, because the first tricky question is like for both of you. I don't know whether you know the answer. What's Tor in Ktor?
What's Tor in Ktor? It basically comes from the idea of constructor.
Okay, so You see, actually, we already had this answer during our presentation.
Yeah, it's like the first thing I also said at the presentation.
Yeah, but still we had this question, so now we have this answer. Okay, so the next question I want to ask you, give me a second. It's from the previous question that was asked to us in the forum from Chun Hung. I use Ktor for server-side API development, but I have to write code to integrate with other framework or library, for example, read expose, Hariri, flyware configuration from application and initialize it. Is there any plan to add these Ktor features? But I want to make this question a bit more abstract and ask you to share the team philosophy about adding new features. It's like what functionality goes into Ktor feature, what should be left to be implemented by the community. So could you share some insights with us, like how we might make the decisions?
Yeah, so it's actually funny because we can share two things here. First of all, we recently talked about our whole design process and how we are now designing everything in the open. So when we have a decision around how we want to design something with Ktor, we create a ticket on UTrack. The team comments on it, but it's open for the entire community to comment on. And just today, Leonid created a new ticket about features and what should go in core features and what should be outside of core features. We want to keep the core as simple as possible and as lightweight as possible. And anything that is not essential for you to basically create a new application that responds to a request basically becomes a feature. In addition to that, our plans are to provide a marketplace for features. So that means that if communities want to contribute their own features via their own authorship, via their own organization, they can do so. And we will make it discoverable for people to easily discover these features and download and install them.
Community, have you heard? Go and implement your features, and they will be added later to Marketplace.
Yes, well, yeah, let's wait.
Okay, after the broadcast, not right now, but after the broadcast, you can go and do something about it.
Yeah.
Anton, you should unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we have a lot more questions to ask from you. And I actually want to start with a very tricky one, Hadi. You mentioned that you are working on the documentation.
Yes.
So there is a question by Subhash. What's the ATA?
What's the ETA?
Yep.
Oh, that's very simple. I respond with another acronym, ASAP. But joking aside, we actually have, we recently hired Andre, who's a full-time technical writer for Ktor. We already have a lot of stuff done, and we will be publishing it soon, probably in parallel to the existing documentation on the website. But documentation is not it's not something that's going to be finished ever, right? We're going to always be improving it. Just as soon as that we have enough material, we'll be publishing. What is the ATA? I hope that in the next I hope that in 2020 we'll be able to start publishing some of the new stuff.
Soon.
Or never. It's never perfect.
Either in the 4th or 5th quarter of 2020. I mean, 2020 is so strange that there's going to be a 5th quarter as well. So let's assume that.
For sure.
Totally makes sense. All right, the next question. So by Antonio Carlos da Silva. Does Ktor have custom exception handling for API standard errors?
Yeah, I think it's a question for me. Actually, it's a simple question because on server side, you can use status-based features for that. And on the client side, you can use response observer and call handler features. Okay.
So yes.
That's actually built-in features in Ktor.
Nice.
Yeah.
So another one by Juan Guillermo. I think this is an incomplete question that he asked, like, is Ktor and GraalVM possible? I think he's asking about GraalVM native image, actually.
Yeah, it's also for me. And yes, recently we played around with that, and you actually have option to build GraalVM native image or use Kotlin with Ktor DSL stuff.
Oh, we are going to learn about it in the next talk, I think. Perfect.
Maybe, yeah.
Some part of it. So going to the next question. The next question, I think, from Dmitry. Is there an easier way to run integration tests with Ktor, for example, similar to Spring Boot test?
You take that one, Leonid.
Yeah, sure. Right now, there is quite complex way to write integration tests with Ktor. It's called Test Application Engine. And we're going to improve the situation with tooling. Yeah.
That's part of the improvements that we're talking about in making testing and deployment also very much easier.
So stay tuned. Everything will be working soon. Yep. Anton, next one.
Okay. So there's Saifur is asking, I want to know how CIO server scales, for instance, in comparison with Nginx or Node.js server with a large user base. Are there any benchmarks? I think you had it kind of mentioned in the talk.
It's experimental still.
It's still experimental.
Yeah.
So, and we don't really have any benchmarks yet. All right.
You remember, benchmarks are only published when you're favorable.
Sure.
That's how we work, right?
That's how everybody is doing stuff.
It's still experimental. I mean, there's no point in us doing any benchmarks when we know that there's, there's still ways to go.
If the benchmark aren't good enough, you say we are experimental.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the answer.
That works. Hey, you want to join for marketing?
Okay, the next question from Artem. Have you thought about deploying Ktor DSLs as serverless functions? What are the blockers?
Well, I mean, you can actually, that's kind of like Kotless, and you can do that with Kotless. With Kotless, you can actually deploy Ktor applications, so it's already possible.
So stay tuned, we have the next talk right about it.
Yeah.
Right. So can you use Kotlin X serialization with Ktor instead of JSON?
Yes.
Yeah. There is
easy question for you.
A very short answer, yes, right?
Is a question from Handra. Is there any support on templating engines such as Thymeleaf for Ktor?
Yes, there's also support for Thymeleaf. There's support for the HTML that I showed. There's free marker, velocity, mustache, so a bunch of different ones.
Okay.
The next question from the same person. Is Server Engine production ready, or we should use Jetty Netty?
Is which one ready?
CIO
engine?
CIO, yes, engine.
No, Jetty or Netty, or just Netty.
Okay.
Or Jetty without the J and add the N.
Okay. Then there was like a very general question for you, Hadi. If you are going to develop the next microservice, will you use Ktor or something else?
Well, I mean, that's
it's a very naive question. Yes.
Yes, I would use Ktor. And now one of the reasons that I joined the team is because I love Ktor so much. So yes, I would use Ktor.
Okay. Some more questions. What's the difference between the showed extension function routes and the experimental locations API? I'm not sure the answer is fast, but...
So the experimental locations is essentially, think of it as statically typed routes, okay? So that gives you the benefit that you essentially define a class, and then you say that the class name is the route, and then the parameters are the route parameters. And then it provides you with more functionality such as refactoring support, navigation. The fact that it's experimental, I mean, Lonya, you can comment more on this, but one of the things that I always want about it is also to maybe rename it to something more intuitive. But yeah, Lonya, anything to add?
Yeah, actually, we're going to improve the locations. We have strict plans to make it multi-platform in the future and make available for the client side.
Okay. One question that I have seen so many times in the chats, and now I see it here as well is there any plan to add support for database migrations?
Well, I mean, when Sveta asked what's in and out of the scope of Ktor, I would say that that is definitely out of the scope of Ktor. I mean, even the question of, database access libraries is kind of falling outside of that. We hope that maybe whether it's us at JetBrains or whether it's the community, that would be maybe a feature that could have some kind of integration point with Ktor that you could use. But database migrations for sure is completely out of scope.
So it's basically up for grabs for the community.
Yeah. Yes.
Community.
Go for it. Go for it.
Up for grabs. So another question, probably the last one or the second to last one, because I think we a bit late in our schedule. So what is your favorite underrated feature about Ktor?
Nonya?
Question from Jakob Ryan.
Actually, from the server side, I like auto reload feature because it's really cost nothing and helps me a lot during the development. Yeah.
But I think locations feature is also great. It's like when, okay, it's not underrated. It's when it's stable.
I think locations feature can be great. I think we still have a lot of work to do there before saying that it is great. Because I mean, even the ability to create, URLs, etc., from statically typed locations is not provided out of the box, and these are things that we need to work on.
Okay. Is there a DI framework that you would suggest to use with Ktor?
You can essentially use any. I think that Coin has a feature. They've actually implemented a feature for Ktor, so you can try that one. It's Coin, right, Linya? Or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Coin. It's spelled with a K.
Okay, there are so many questions. We are not probably able to ask that many more. So let's, I think, wrap it up here.
Yep. So thank you, Hadi and Leonid, for joining us. We are waiting you to join us a bit later at the big Q&A. And there we'll be able to ask more of your questions to the representative of Ktor team. So now let's move on to the next talk.
Yes, and the next talk is actually all about the cloud and serverless. So today we are not just developing the applications, the server-side applications, but we are also deploying them into the cloud, as I mentioned before. And the next talk will be exactly about that. So we have Vladislav Tankov, the team lead from JetBrains. He has been working on quite a few cloud-based projects internally, and like from logs management, pipelines to natural language processing instrument backends. And Vladislav is the creator of Kotlin framework. And today we have a pre-recorded talk by him, and we will have a Q&A after that session. So let's enjoy the talk.
Hello everyone, my name is Vladislav Tankov. I'm a software developer at JetBrains. Also, I'm the creator of Kotlin, a Kotlin serverless framework. We'll start with a brief introduction on the subject of serverless. It's a pretty hot topic right now, but not everyone knows what it is. By the definition, serverless is a cloud computing execution model in which the cloud provider runs the server and dynamically manages the allocation of machine resources. Thank you, Wikipedia. In other words, there are three simple steps that comprise the basics of all serverless. First of all, we take really small elements, functions, and this is very important. Those functions are actually stateless, meaning that they do not save any state between invocations. Then we take events and link an application with them into an event-driven application. In the end, we deploy our event-driven function-based application to manage at runtime. That runtime may be managed by cloud providers like AWS Cloud or provided by your own DevOpses. Either way works. From those 3 simple steps emerges a full application building approach that helps you to create very complex applications. For example, you can create a REST API application with stateless functions that serve different HTTP routes. Those functions may call other functions synchronously and asynchronously, and they may work with databases and other cloud services. We see that serverless is an application building approach for creating cloud-native applications with a very specific architecture. Why should we use it? What are the pros of such an approach? First of all, in case of serverless, you pay per request. This means that if your application is not used, you pay literally nothing. And let's be honest, for a pet project, it is a great option that can save you a lot of money. Second, since your functions are stateless, your environment is managed by the cloud provider, and the whole application is event-based, there is no problem with an automatic scaling. Got a lot of events? Okay, scale up the application and set sail. Got no users by Respawn? Okay, scale down the application to 0 working resources. No need to go bankrupt. And last but certainly not least, you'll get fault tolerance. Indeed, if the problem is with one specific request that makes a function fail, it does not mean that the whole application should fail. It means that this specific function created for this event will fail, and that's on. So, no cons. Is it actually that good? Unfortunately, no. Serverless at its roots is overcomplicated. On the right part of slide, you can see a part of a real-world function deployment. It is a super simple serverless function that serves only one HTTP path, and it goes all the way up and all the way down. You will need around 100 lines of configuration to define your serverless application in some cloud. Those lines will instruct cloud providers which events the serverless application expects and emits are, and which functions are subscribed to which event. And you know, the real problem is that you will also need to know a special language of configuration management to write this configuration. But should it really be that way? Should we write so much configuration code for very simple tasks? Kotless offers a simple yet powerful solution to the configuration problem. Here is some very simple code. It speaks for itself. I want to create a get handler for the path hello world and return hello world from it. It isn't clear what headers should be used, but okay, use the default ones. Let the MIME type be plain text. But don't make me write a deployment for something that is very obvious. So, the main idea is that in a bunch of cases, the code speaks for itself. In the case of API interaction, when we define in code what method, path, and parameters we expect, why should I repeat it in a configuration script? So, if it can be deduced, it should be deduced and created automatically. Basically, that is what Kotlin does. It integrates with existing frameworks, introspects them, and generates a configuration for your application right from the application itself, from any framework to any cloud. We call this approach infrastructure in code. Kotlin deduces the infrastructure right from the application and deploys it to the cloud, thus reducing the routine of defining the deployment. You write the code with the framework of your choice, like Spring or Ktor. Then you choose cloud platform to use and just chill. Kotlin will do everything else for you. And you know, the code we've been discussing is an actual Kotlin code. So, what's in the box? What does Kotlin support right now? Several frameworks are supported. Each of them can be deployed to the cloud with your preferred target runtime. Let's take a look at that step by step. First of all, there are a few different frameworks that Kotlin is able to introspect and generate deployments for. One is our beloved Ktor, with its function-based HTTP DSL and without any user reflection. It guarantees very fast startup and great performance. Another is very well-known Spring framework, more specifically Spring Boot. In this case, Kotlin introspects the annotations of Spring to generate configuration of a serverless application. Finally, there is also the Kotlin's own DSL. It supports all the default operations that other web frameworks support. But the distinctive feature of the Kotlin DSL is that it was specifically designed for serverless use cases. As for the target cloud platforms, Kotlin currently supports Amazon Web Services via API Gateway and AWS Lambda. We are working hard to make the first setup of AWS simpler. I'll talk about that a bit later. We also plan to support Google Cloud Platform and Microsoft Azure. Kotlin is a cloud-agnostic tool, so we expect that migrating applications between clouds should be possible in one click. Since Kotlin is a multi-platform language, Kotlin also aims to support different targets, also called function runtimes. Right now, Kotlin works with the JVM runtime. It has some drawbacks. For example, the JVM is infamous for very slow starts. Kotlin is trying to mask this problem with auto-warming and other techniques that will be applied to your application automatically. We also support GraalVM in beta, which eliminates the problem of cold starts and is very performant in general. However, it brings new problem of slow compilation and partly unsupported reflection. Finally, Kotlin JavaScript support is also under development right now. It is also very fast on startup, but not so performant overall. So, this is the state of Kotlin right now. 3 frameworks supported, 2 runtimes, and 1 clouds. Other things are under development. Oh, and yeah, I've mentioned attempts to simplify working with the cloud. Kotlin has a local start. With local start, you can run your application locally without access to the cloud. Kotlin will run cloud emulation and will override clients used in the application if you use a specific extension function to connect to the local emulation. So with Kotlin, you'll be able to run the application locally with full cloud emulation and even debug it. Now let's sum it up. With Kotlin, you'll be able to choose your preferred runtime, JVM, JavaScript, or GraalVM, write an application with the framework of your choice, Spring, Ktor, or Kotlin's own DSL, test and debug the application locally, and in the end, deploy it to the cloud you prefer. Now, let's dive a bit into the internals of Kotlin. How does it work? What is the magic behind it? Under the hood, the architecture of Kotlin is pretty straightforward. During the deployment process, an application passes a few steps of the deployment pipeline. In the first step, the application is being parsed. Depending on the frameworks you use, either Spring Boot or Ktor, Kotlin chooses the appropriate parser. The result of parsing is a so-called schema. It's a definition of the REST API and events of the application written in a cloud-agnostic way, inspired by OpenAPI and cloudevents.io. Once we get the schema, transpilation is performed. Kotlin uses Terraform as its configuration management tool. It's a mature and very popular DevOps tool for creating infrastructure. Basically, Kotlin performs a transpilation of its own schema into Terraform. Note that transpilation is cloud-dependent. The code generated for AWS would differ from the code generated for Google Cloud Platform. Once the Terraform code is ready, the deployment is performed. It's done via Terraform and Kotlin is not involved in the process at all. This architecture gives Kotlin a great deal of flexibility. We are able to add support for new frameworks and new clouds independently and safely. Kotlin also has so-called cloud extensions or cloud integration. Cloud integration is necessary since not everything can be expressed in the standard form of web frameworks DSLs. For example, if you are creating a cloud-native application, you need to work with cloud services. But to do so, you have to get permissions. And there is no such abstraction as permission in Ktor or Spring. That's why Kotlin provides its own extensions to deal with the cloud infrastructure. Such extensions include special annotations to grant permissions and special annotations to work with events and define event handlers. Now, let's get to the demo.
So, let's take a look at an example written with Ktor and deployed via Kotlin. It's a very simple URL shortener, and you can see the way it works. Yep, here it is. This example is taken from the main repository of Kotlin, and you can find it there at kotlin/example/ktor/shortener@JetBrains/Kotlin. The URL shortener is already up and running at ktor.short.kotlin.io. First of all, let us take a look at the Gradle script. We apply Kotlin Gradle plugin with ID io.kotlin version 0.17. And we are adding Ktor-lang dependency with the same version. This dependency is providing Ktor DSL. Next, we are adding a Kotlin configuration. It includes certain configurations related to AWS, name of credentials profile used, name of the region where we are deploying our application, name of the bucket, and so on. It also includes the definition of DNS record that application should use, ktor.short.kotlin.io. One more pretty interesting part is the extension block. In this case, we are using Terraform extensions functionality. Our shortener saves data to DynamoDB, and we need to create it with Terraform code. We instruct Kotless to add the file with the DynamoDB table to generate a deployment code before the deployment itself. And here is the definition of DynamoDB file. But you know, there is so much configuration here. What if I don't have an AWS account? What if I don't have a DNS record? No problem. Local starts to the rescue. We can just remove all the paths related to AWS, open Gradle, and run local start. First of all, local task starts a local stack. It's a cloud emulation tool that Kotlin uses. In case of a shortener, it will emulate DynamoDB table, and after the start of local stack, Kotlin applies Terraform extensions to local stack, effectively creating a DynamoDB table. After it, application is started, and we can see it working on localhost. Since we have the whole cloud emulation, we are able to actually shorten the link. Our application would use a cloud emulation started locally and DynamoDB table that is emulated locally, and it will even work. Now let's take a look at the code itself. Using Kotlin for Ktor, you should only inherit one interface, Kotlin, and everything else remains the same. You'll just define get and post routes inside the routing lambda, and using the same application you would use inside Ktor and inside standard Ktor engines. Static features are detected automatically by Kotlin, so the static files will be sorted from S3 instead of lambdas, simple and effective. One more interesting part is URL storage. This is the object that is annotated with granular permissions annotation that grants anyone who accesses this object a read and write access to our DynamoDB table. This way works lambdas that are handling HTTP events, and this way they are accessing the DynamoDB table that we have created. So, this example is available in the main repository of Kotlin. Now let's back to the presentation.
And finally, let's talk about the future of Kotlin. I've already mentioned that we have the support of two more clouds in development, Google Cloud Platform and Microsoft Azure. We also have GraalVM in beta and Kotlin.js under development. But that is not all. We are also aiming to create an IntelliJ IDEA plugin with remote log scaling and even cloud debugging, since it is now supported in AWS and will probably be supported in other clouds too. We are willing to develop cloud extensions, that is add authentication and more events, including custom event handlers, and there is much more that we would like to do. Hopefully, someday all of it will help people create serverless applications more easily. Thank you for watching and good luck. I hope to see you in serverless worlds.
So now we are back, and thank you, Vladislav, for the recording. It was interesting to learn about Kotlin, and now we have the Q&A part with you live. So welcome.
Welcome, Vlad.
Yeah.
So the first question is probably a bit more historical, but we're curious, why have you decided to start Kotlin project at all? What's the story behind it?
Yeah, well, it was about 2 years ago. I had a kind of crazy idea. I wanted to try to migrate a Kotlin application and all functions inside it into serverless. Kind of make each function serverless and serialize global states, serialize all the arguments between calls of the functions. In general, it should
make possible creation of serverless application from any application in Kotlin, but it would work a little bit slower. And after it, well, we've started implementing it and understood that probably a little bit more useful example of an application of serverless approach is to create just some things that translate existing web applications, not all applications, into serverless. So this is a story.
That's interesting. Can you recall what was the most difficult part when you started working on Kotlin? Was there like an issue you had to deal with like for a while and it was complicated and so on?
Mm-hmm. Well, on the contrary, with other existing serverless migrators, like, I don't know, AWS Chalice or something like it, Kotlin is actually parsing the application. So I had a lot of time on trying to understand how does Kotlin parser work, how should I make it parse existing application, and in what way should I deduce from it actual configuration of application. I think I spent most of the time during the development of Kotlin on different parsers for different DSLs and so on.
Thank you. That sounds really interesting. Okay, let's move on to the questions from our audience based on the content that you presented. So the first question is from Tom. Are there APIs to generate Kotlin endpoints applications programmatically?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've had the same question a few days ago in an issues on GitHub. Right now, we don't have such an API. There are some existing serverless frameworks that provide such APIs, like Osiris, but we don't have such an API. And from the point of Kotlin, from the point of view of Kotlin, it's kind of excessive since we are trying to actually deduce the serverless deployment, and we are not expecting our users to actually define the serverless application, but it looks like we will have to add such an APIs because of some complex situations when, for example, user's application is not only written but also partly generated.
I see. So there is also a question by Purnima, I think. Does Kotlin work well with sort of microservices architecture with multiple different frameworks under the hood?
Mm-hmm. In general, it is possible to use Kotlin to create microservices, like serverless microservices, but you'll have to create different microservices with different models and different different models and different applications of Gradle plugin. But it is possible, and I think it would work pretty good.
Okay, thank you. Another question that just came to us from Artem. Is it possible to update a runtime library for multiple amount of serverless applications without building each?
Yes. Yes, I think it's possible.
Easy answer.
Why not?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There is a very good question about DynamoDB annotation, I think. It's, since it's AWS specific, does it mean that it's kind of not trivial to change them to another cloud provider?
Well, no. We have some annotations, permission annotations right now, like DynamoDB table, S3 bucket, but all of them are examples of permission annotations. I just didn't have a lot of time to implement all the annotations we wanted for AWS, and we can implement for different cloud providers specific annotations. Probably we will have to generate all the annotations for permissions from specific cloud provider, maybe from schema of Terraform, I don't know. But it does not mean that you can use Kotlin only with AWS, or that Kotlin is somehow very dependent on AWS infrastructure and AWS internal architecture.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Then there is a tricky question, I think, from Clarkson. Is Kotlin production ready? And is there is the second part, is there an option to configure, for example, Elastic Beanstalk from AWS, or for this I need to use Terraform?
Well, we don't consider Kotlin production ready right now. It is more like an experimental project that is being developed right now. Because of it, it has a label incubator on GitHub. But I believe that in some not very distant future, it would be production ready. But we will consider it production ready as soon as we will support all the 3 clouds existing and all the 3 runtimes we want. Right now, we have only 2 runtimes and 1 cloud. Yeah, as for Elastic Beanstalk, currently Kotlin deploys infrastructure on AWS right to AWS Lambdas. So we don't use Elastic Beanstalk, and you'll probably have to configure it by yourself if you want. And I believe if you want to use Elastic Beanstalk, you don't have to use Kotlin at all, since it's kind of a parallel technologies.
So I think we got the most important thing here. It's so far not yet very stable, but it will be soon. And right now you can still try it, use it, and as usual, provide feedback of what features you miss there, what you want, and so on and so forth. So please share your ideas, your feedback, and so on. So now I think that we are very close. We're at least a bit behind our schedule. So let's move on to the next big Q&A session. So I think that let's first let's meet Vlad in just 2 minutes, as well as other speakers. Just now I want to remind you that you can win a mug for the best question for the day. So you know that we give these questions, and for making this Q&A session with all the speakers live and interesting, we need your questions, right? So just ask your questions in chat. So like you see, you need our mug, we need your questions. So ask questions. Okay, so I think that now we are ready to add all our speakers back, and all the speakers of the day. So hi, Sebastian again. Hi, Hadi. Hi, Vlad. Hi, Lona. And also today for our Q&A sessions, Roman Elizarov and Andrei Brislav agreed to join us. So welcome, everyone, again. And before we start, we asked our audience to share which country and speakers they're from. So I thought that it's probably not fair that we have only this competition thing for our participants, but not for speakers. So now let's do a short round of a small competition for all of you here, for the speakers and guests, like Roman and Jerry, please join. The prize is small present from me when we meet next time. And the question is, what do you think the most popular country that our participants mentioned in the chat today? So we have one choice, country that most of the participants are from. You probably followed the chat, you probably saw different countries, so you can guess. And the winner wins the prize from me. So you can start sharing your options. Country that the majority of participants are from, that shared with us their city and country during the chat today. Okay,
I will start. I wish it was Estonia, but it's probably Germany.
And you are right, actually.
Oh, that's unfair. What about the rest of us?
But I think that it's definitely unfair. Because we shouldn't.
And he's a host. He can't participate. This is illegal. This is all set up.
Yes, because he's a host and can't participate. But good news, I have also the numbers for the second country. So I think that only me now is a bad situation, because I will need to give 2 prizes now. And 2 prizes, but okay.
I will not guess anymore.
Yeah, I thought. Yeah, but the second most popular country where we had most of the participants. It's also interesting.
Let's try France.
Not really.
Russia?
3rd place, actually.
US?
Okay.
Hadi, I owe you a prize. Congrats. So that's how I need to give 2 prizes to Anton and Hadi. Yeah, but that happens. So I think that now we're ready to go to our big Q&A session with all of you. So please, if you watch live our translation, please share your questions, because we have some before, but it's more interesting to answer those that are shared right now. So Anton, do you want to start?
I'm trying to scroll over those the list of questions, and so I found the first one. Those are like long questions, and I would like to find a short one so I don't have to read too much. But we have a personal question to Sebastian, actually. So what are your favorite 1.4 features in the release?
In 1.4?
Yep.
I think it's not directly a feature, but the work done on Kotlin JS, I think, is my favorite one, because I really feel there is a lot of potential for Kotlin in the front end for a very long time, and I have tried Kotlin JS previously multiple times and faced some issues that were pretty blocking, and I have been trying the latest a bit in Kotlin 1.4 on the Kotlin JS side, and I think there are some big progresses. And I think with some time to mature until next year, it will be ready for really compete with TypeScript and things like that. So I really believe in that. And combined with the server side and mobile support, I think the multi-platform will truly take it. Yeah, it's a powerful feature that really will help to show that multi-platform development is something super important.
Okay, thank you. Then we have a kind of a provocative question from our audience. Of course, we now have like different frameworks working with Kotlin. Spring works great with Kotlin. There is also Ktor, and there are questions about. One question is about what do you think? What is easier to learn for a newcomer, Spring or Ktor? And also there is a question, what would be your advice for folks who are considering which frameworks they should use? So I think that if we can hear like these opinions from different standpoints, and also from Andrzej, you have to add something, it would be amazing. So like how to choose, what to do?
I can start. Like everybody's trying to avoid answering hard questions, so let me do it. I mean, it really depends what you're trying to achieve. I mean, even if you're a newcomer, like, what's your goal? What you're writing? Like, what's your plan? Like, if you're like just playing or writing simple stuff, like Ktor is really good because it's easy to get started, small. If you plan to scale your project, it depends on how you plan to scale it, right? So Spring, for example, is a major framework. Like there are lots of guys to do lots of complex stuff. Ktor is a young framework. I mean, there's no single answer what's easier. Like you simply can't answer. It all depends what you're trying to achieve. Go around, ask other people around you what they know, what they would recommend that, and especially ask people who face similar problems than you, not something like me, because I mean, I can't solve this particular problem for you because, I might have completely different goals when I'm writing a server-side app than you have.
If I may say something as well, I think that it's difficult for us to answer, right? I mean, what should I say? Spring, and Sebastian, you can say Ktor, and then we'll meet afterwards and have a virtual beer, right? But at the end of the day, like, the important thing is that now you have a lot of choice, right? And that choice is also showing the commitment to the Kotlin and ecosystem as a whole. And each framework has its pros, its cons, its way of working, some things you like, some things you don't like. And it's really a matter of you deciding what it is that you want and use it. It's as simple as that.
And
there's no rule of thumb.
it's fair to add there are more frameworks also.
Yeah,
some of
there's
them are
Quarkus,
new, and
there's Micronaut,
yeah.
there's,
So and they also support Kotlin. So that's
there's
that
Java
also makes sense to
2E
check them.
Enterprise. Maybe there is.
Maybe to add something, I think what is also important is to see the various frameworks supporting the Kotlin ecosystem, coroutine, Kotlin initialization, and that's I think something pretty important to be able to target multi-platform, etc. So whatever the arrangement you choose, getting better support for Kotlin libraries into the various frameworks is something that really matters, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have found one interesting question. It's probably a funny one even. There's a person asking, should I move from PHP to Kotlin?
I can take it.
Andre, you go with that.
It a little bit depends on your goals, but it seems that PHP and Kotlin are in like very different sub ecosystems of the world. So if you want to change the entire ecosystem, then you're very welcome in Kotlin. And actually, PHP and Kotlin are like in very different styles of approaching web programming. So if you want to change for something optimized for larger projects, for higher performance, for things that are leveraging asynchrony and parallelism and stuff like that, you're very welcome in Kotlin. PHP is not designed for that. So yeah, and but if you are happy with PHP, you can just try Kotlin for a change, just as an entertainment. You're very welcome here anytime.
I can add to this question. Basically, if they ask about PHP, why not to ask about the same about Python?
There, yeah.
No.
Yeah. So for I'm still taking it. So for Python, it's actually pretty interesting. Python is in many ways a great language, and Kotlin learned from Python a lot more than it learned from PHP. And still, it seems like it's there is a very big distinction in any case, which is Kotlin is a statically typed language upfront, and Python as well as PHP are initially dynamically typed languages and very dynamic in nature. Like everything is happening there is very dynamic. And this is basically an upfront optimization for different scales of projects. You can have a small Kotlin project and a huge Python project, of course, but it's much easier to have a huge Kotlin project than a huge Python project, even if you have optional types and all that. So if you're into writing like really big applications with a lot of people involved, that code bases that are going to live for a long time, you're very welcome here. It will be a lot easier for you.
Thank you. The next question from the chat, recent chat from Kirill. Could you tell what your plans about supporting async interaction with databases, coroutines, and so on? I don't know who exactly it should be addressed at, but.
No, but that's a question I'm interested in as well, because we have worked on R2DBC, which is reactive for SQL databases, and we provide some coroutines in reactive APIs could adapt to coroutines. So we provide coroutines asynchronous support for databases like that, and I'm interested if there is some plans on the outside of Spring and R2DBC communities to leverage R2DBC, or maybe create your own thing, or maybe that's not use case that you target. Curious about that.
I can answer that. I mean, we're not in Kotlin trying to reinvent the world. I mean, Kotlin has different philosophy. We're trying to integrate with the world, right? So we on JVM, Kotlin interoperates with all the libraries JVM. On JavaScript, on native, the same. So we don't have like plans like let's write everything in Kotlin, like blah blah blah. So I mean, and we're really happy. There is a nice JVM ecosystem and Spring side for reactive database access. I mean, you can use it. Like there's no need to go rewrite it from scratch.
Sorry, I now feel a bit bad because I think that I'm trying to pick up the complicated questions from my colleagues. Oops. So the next one is a good one from Chetan. What is the feature the Kotlin team is more excited in the near future? Or probably from Spring perspective, it's also interesting. Like, what's more exciting awaits us?
New compiler backends. I mean, that's the...
We are boring.
No, that's the most exciting piece of work that will ever be released. It will fix so many bugs and will open so many new possibilities.
What about new front end then?
A few front even more exciting, but it's longer. But it's further away from us. More work to finish it. So short-term exciting stuff and new backends. That's what Stas talked about in his talk in first day. That's a really exciting next thing.
Okay,
yeah,
so
that's my favorite as well. I mean, the compiler work both on backend and frontend are super important, and I think Kotlin needs to finish to mature on that, and that will be amazing when available. And maybe linked to that, maybe having more stable compiler plugin API in order to allow the community to basically leverage more compile time plugin, etc. That will be super useful, and we are waiting for that. We know it takes some time to mature, and that's perfectly fine. But I think that will allow pretty interesting stuff in the Kotlin ecosystem, including on Spring side.
Okay. So we have a question by Louis. Can Kotlin be used for embedded systems via Graal VM or Kotlin native? And if we have any plans for moving Kotlin into embedded systems?
Well, I guess it very much depends on what you call an embedded system. If by an embedded system you mean like Raspberry Pi, absolutely yes.
That's not an embedded system anymore. It's a fully featured computer.
Yeah, that's
high performant one. You can build clusters with that. Maybe Arduino.
Arduino, is it still 8-bit?
I mean, it's moving away from bit. I mean, when people say Arduino, they still mean 8-bit. STM microcontrollers definitely never, or highly unlikely Kotlin will work there. But I mean, there is a trend actually to move to ARM even in Arduino ecosystem. And maybe in a few years, I mean, these ARMs becoming bigger and bigger. So maybe a few years. I mean, they now run Python. They now run other things on those ARMs. So I mean, that would be a great community project. Somebody can take Kotlin native and port it to like ARM Arduinos. I mean, that is a feasible project.
Or take Graal VM and port it onto Arduino.
Or yeah.
May not be as easy, but
that's a very interesting question. Was added. I think it's a regular interview question when you apply for a job. I don't know why it's about Kotlin, but the question sounds like, how do you see Kotlin after 3 years? From Hamza.
Great.
Let's extend it after 5 years.
I think I would say multi-platform for sure.
Definitely in the cloud,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
I would say, multi-platform, running machine learning in the cloud.
And Kotlin will be definitely stable before than 3 years,
Absolutely.
right?
I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be running also mathematics. There has some nice projects. With AI and stuff. Big
and
data.
Also, Spring users will pick Kotlin first.
Oh yeah, Spring will Kotlin first. That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
And you could have that now. You just have to change the combo box on the
and we change all our code base automatically.
Actually,
Sebastian, it's in your hands.
Hadi, you could actually just make an extension for Chrome that changes that combo box for you.
Okay, there is a very general question and very serious one for everybody. So how would you sell Kotlin to conservative people, for instance, to management?
there is non-conservative management too.
Yeah.
So is it management or is it just conservative? Because I think there's probably more conservative developers than there are conservative managers.
Okay, Hadi, how do you sell Kotlin to conservative developers with 20 years of Java experience?
The same way, I mean, I would sell it the same way I would sell everything else, which is take a look, see if it provides you value, and if it does, use it.
That's a reasonable thing, but can you highlight some of the key features? Why should anyone even try Kotlin?
Focus on the problems they're having and show them how this can help solve their problems. And if it does, then you probably got them on your side. If it doesn't, then why even continue to try?
Makes sense. Any other opinions?
Yeah, I think I would favor the multi-platform aspect. I mean, when Kotlin JS will be more mature, I think a lot of companies are spending a lot of money on both front-end and server side. There is big silo and no communication, no sharing of knowledge, etc. So really, when multi-platform will be more mature, I think there is a lot of gain by sharing some culture, knowledge, libraries, etc. And even management could see some value in that.
Yeah, also feel free to just walk happily past their desk, you know, and wearing a Kotlin t-shirt, for example. That also helps.
Okay.
Okay, then the next question, actually it was very similar to the one about Kotlin features, but the question for the Ktor team, probably to Leonid, what is the upcoming feature that you personally are mostly excited about?
About Ktor or about Kotlin?
You can answer both, actually. If you're excited about both Ktor and Kotlin, share it with us.
About Kotlin, I'm really happy that multi-platform is going forward and providing features like harmonizers to us. I mean, with tooling support and with language support. And about Ktor, I'm really happy that we're going to introduce native WebSockets, for example, and native sockets, and working in this.
Okay. We have a personal question for Sveta, actually. Is that a Kotlin pillow behind you? And where did you get it?
Careful, you're going to incriminate yourself there.
It's from Amsterdam. I remember that pillow.
This one, exactly, yes. But you also have one, right? Lana, why it's not somewhere on your fridge?
But having been to Amsterdam is not a crime.
Yes, it's not a crime. So yes, that's the pillow from Kotlin Conf.
Kotlin Conf, what's that?
Kotlin Conf, our next big conference.
That you know the kind of event when people actually got together in one place, offline.
The attendees are too young to remember.
Never heard about it.
Like in Stone Ages, remember?
You read about that in history books, maybe.
Okay.
There is the question for Roman. Probably it's a bit from for a different day about libraries, but still, should we start using Stateflow now? Or should we move away from channels and try Stateflow and Shardflow first?
Yes, please try Stateflow now. I mean, we released milestone release, and we're eagerly waiting for feedback because there's a short window before we stabilize it. So try it and tell us what's missing. If you like it, it solves your problems. And we're always looking for feedback. I mean, that's my advice.
Yeah, and I know that because of Sébastien, to some extent, the release of the stable release of Kotlin coroutines will be sooner than initially planned. So.
Yes. So I mean, you have not a lot of time. I mean, even though it's not that we pushed out something wrong. I mean, we've been pouring over this code for a long time. I mean, and look at it. Still, the more people use it, the more chances they'll notice something missing or whatever. We do this just to get your feedback.
Okay. We have a question for both Andrei and Roman. Are you guys still involved in the Kotlin-related libraries and frameworks made by JetBrains, or you're too busy with the language design?
Well, I'm definitely not involved with any libraries. Haven't ever been. Actually, I touched even the standard library. I touched too little. I was always submerged in the compiler.
I am still involved with the libraries, but I plan to move more to the language side than to the libraries. But I will continue producing their design because I think that it's important. I mean, it's the language that is kind of intertwined with libraries design. I mean, we design language so that you can write code, which includes libraries, and libraries. I mean, need to use the language features, or otherwise, why we do those language features if they are not used by the library? So it's kind of two related activities: design language and design library, in my mind. So I will be definitely keeping track of what's going on in libraries.
The question from, I think, the beginning of our broadcast from Andrei, and it's mostly to JetBrains folks, probably Hadi can start to answer. Do folks use space? How does it suit the developers' need?
Oh, sorry, what space?
Yes. Okay, who wants to answer?
Tabs and spaces, you know.
Keyboard, this horizontal long.
Yeah, look, it's right here. I use it all the time. Yes, we use space. We use it quite extensively at JetBrains, and different teams right now use different features. For example, the Ktor team is entirely on space. The package search team is entirely on space. So yes, it's used extensively inside JetBrains.
And it works. Very convenient. I can just confirm that we all...
It totally works.
Yeah, we need to check some details.
Multi-platform, 100% Kotlin code.
Yeah, there is this kind of a connected question. Can JetBrains make space source code public so that we can learn from it?
I think there is, like, for example, Kotlin React was born out of space, and that is public. There are the protocols that is being used for some of the communication, which is RD, which is a public library. That is also public also. That's the same thing that's being used in ReSharper or Rider. So those things that make sense are public. Other stuff right now, it doesn't really make much sense. Like, for example, Space actually was started development before Kotlin multi-platform was even around. And so they have on a as-needed basis implementation of multi-platform date time, right? But it's not extensive. It's exactly what they have. And it doesn't make sense to try and extract that because there's already that effort going on the Kotlin team.
And I just want to add that we listened to this request, that the request is to provide some multi-platform samples, like a comprehensive sample for server-side, and we're looking at it. We also have some plans to provide some more simpler samples, not of probably, that big application is still something useful to learn from.
Okay, so the next one, I think it was partially covered in Roman's talk, but I think it's still good to recap again. How Java evolution will impact Kotlin. So Roman, you can probably give your opinion.
I'll just recap that. So we're totally committed to Java and JVM compatibility. So we keep track of what's both happening in Java libraries, but that's the easy part. We can just use Java, like you can use any Java library from Kotlin. That's easy. It's all the updates in Java libraries automatically available to Kotlin users. Language is, so we're also keeping track of what's happening in Java language. It's not to copy that, or we need to interop. Like if there is a new feature in Java language, like records, we need to make sure that you can use it from Kotlin and vice versa, like it plays well Kotlin both sides. So we're definitely keeping track on that.
We have a couple of questions about multi-platform. Can a project start JVM, then switch to multi-platform afterwards, or is it something you must start with? From Alexandra. I know the answer, but probably someone wants to.
You
share
can answer
more
that.
detailed. You definitely can switch, and the whole idea of Kotlin being interoperable with all these platforms is that it should be easy to extract some repetitive code into a module, so it shouldn't be an issue. And I think that is the same design philosophy that was from the very beginning used with Java, when interoperability is one of the key things that the team thinks about, and whenever the design decision is made, it's always under consideration.
Okay. The next one about Groovy, actually, or related to Groovy. So people like a very interesting feature in Groovy called the AST transformations. And they're asking if there's anything similar coming to Kotlin ever.
Yeah, Andrew can answer.
Andrei, go.
Yeah. So if anything, it's far away. But we've been dreaming about something like that for a long time, because it's basically a kind of a compiler plugin. And there is a big difference between like the style of Groovy, where you can like hack on anything, which is like the spirit of a dynamic language. And here we would like to make it a little more disciplined, so that we can guarantee some sort of result. Like if it doesn't fail, you get something that works. So we want it a little more limited. Also, there is an interesting challenge of integrating it with an IDE. But in any case, at the moment, it's in a state of a dream. So it's not even a sketch on a sheet of paper. It's a dream. So don't expect it soon.
But you can already write compiler plugin, and people do it. Like, take a look at the awesome job other people do writing compiler plugin. It gives you the same amount of power and even more. I mean, you can do really amazing things already, even though it's not stable yet. But that's our short-term goal, to stabilize compiler plugins, and then we'll see what's next.
Yeah, so the compiler plugins we have at the moment are not proper AST transformers. They are lower level, working on the backend side and maybe plugging into the resolution algorithms. So AST transformations per se, just a dream, but you can write plugins if you like.
Thank you. Then one more question to, I think, Lona or Hadi, or Hadi or Lona, I don't know who wants to answer it. Are there any plans to make available a command line interface for Ktor in order to maintain an app supporting a code generation like in Ruby on Rails?
For command line generation of apps, maybe, yes, this is something we're looking at. No promises, but for the actual generation of the wizard, like what would be equivalent to the wizard, yes, most likely.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next question is for whoever knows the answer. So can Kotlin application execute Kotlin script at runtime? And is it possible to limit the features of the language available in the script? Silence.
I can answer, actually.
Okay.
The first part of the question, definitely yes. The second is probably no. I mean, it's not an easy part, and it's not. It requires some time to set up, but yes, you definitely can run Kotlin script in applications.
Yeah, actually, speaking of limitations to the language features in scripts, you can have extra checks in your scripts. You can plug in some visitors for the tree that will make extra checks there. It will, in some sense, limit the power of the language, but not of the libraries that you link to as binaries from the script.
I guess it's about forbidding to call system exit from the script.
Oh, that's called sandboxing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
you can use GVM security manager for that. I mean.
Yeah, it's not Kotlin's business to do that.
Okay.
Right. Yep. So what else do we have? So this Let's see.
Oh, I see one interesting question. I think that one is for Andre, and I think he has answered it multiple times already, but it's still a good question. Is there any language feature you regret of having been added to Kotlin?
Let's make a video with Andre who just answers this question.
Yes. 10 hour, long stretch of this repeatedly answering these questions, like so people can enjoy.
Yeah, I think we can have multiple videos because there are multiple things. Yeah, well, I'll try to answer slightly differently this time. So the good news is there are things I used to regret, and we have fixed them. So many things you didn't even notice, but we fixed a lot of stupid idiosyncrasies of the initial design. That some of them were just unanticipated issues. Some were bad ideas that we scrapped. Yeah, so on that list, I don't know. The biggest pain was the IEEE 745 arithmetic, so all floating point numbers. That was a really messy thing that our brave colleague Dmitry Petrov has thoroughly analyzed, like from top to bottom, and implemented in a consistent way. And I'm very grateful to him for doing that. Yeah, and for the things that are not so easily fixable, it's my usual list. So inheritance by delegation is a very problematic feature. It's very hard to extend. There are many natural requests that everybody makes that we simply can't implement. So it's this sort of thing that sort of shows you one candy and you want more candy and you can't have more candy. So yeah, I definitely regret that. Also, companion objects are not that great. They seemed like a very nice idea. From the very beginning, we knew that this extra indentation was kind of not so great, but we thought, okay, maybe it's a good trade-off. Well, not really. It's not a good trade-off. There are multiple issues with it, and the ones every other Kotlin developer has met in practice are the easier ones. And then there are issues with inheritance. You don't want to know what kind of problems companion objects cause through inheritance. And we had lengthy design meetings before 1.0 just forbidding some things in inheritance to make companion objects slightly well-behaved, but it was not enough. We should have basically outlawed them all.
Thank you. So I think we are very close to end of our panel discussion. Anton, do you have you found anything?
I have one. I can see one technical question, which might be interesting. So DSL or annotations, and I guess it goes to Sebastian and Hadi and Leonid.
You should just speak. It's not.
Okay,
so
Sebastian, you go first. What's your opinion on DSL versus annotations?
I guess I have created Spring Foo for a reason, and I guess it shares some common points with Ktor. Honestly, I have never watched Ktor in detail because I don't want to be tempted to copy. So I have honestly not watched it that much, but I see some common points, and I think DSLs and functional style is a good fit with Kotlin because the language is really designed for that. Annotations are also perfectly fine on Kotlin as well. So it's really a matter of preference. I just push for supporting both on Spring side, and I personally prefer the DSL and functional style, but that's really up to people. And I'm happy that we can support both. We have an interesting experiment on Spring Foo, which is providing the same DSLs in a kind of Kotlin spirit in both Java and Kotlin. So we have Jafu and Kofu. And we can see that there is a big difference between the two languages. Jafu is usable, but much more verbose, and there is a lot of noise in it. So Well, with annotation, Java and Kotlin are pretty close. When you use more DSL and functional stuff, I think the difference between the two languages is bigger. And that's where I think the Java side will continue to love more the annotations. And at Kotlin, maybe we will see more DSL functional constructs.
Okay, thank you. Hadi, do you have anything against annotations?
I don't have anything against annotations, and for me, it isn't really a case of annotations versus functional style, or however you want to call it. For me, it's more around explicitness versus implicitness. It's more around magic versus, clarity. Yeah, I mean, I think that annotations are useful, but if I see a function that is annotated with 15 things, and the goal of that is to not repeat yourself, but now I have to understand what those 15 annotations are doing, it's not really providing me much more value there. So I think that there's a balance that can be had with both approaches.
I actually choose DSLs here because of two reasons. The first one, you can step in. The second, you can put the breakpoint inside.
Actually, both Leonid and Hadi are talking about a very interesting thing. So if our annotations were actually connected to some code, it's like they can come in the form of annotations, but the problem is you can't use them as code. They are just magic. So if they could be connected to some actually executable code, we could inspect them, we can do breakpoints, so on and so forth. And there are interesting design conversation around this idea. This is popularly called decorators in many other languages. So we're looking, well, not specifically looking at that yet, but it's an interesting idea within
AOT, right?
Well, it's a different thing, by the way.
AOP, sorry, not AOT. AOP.
Yeah, well, with AOP, it's kind of it's a bit scarier than that, right? So you write an expression in one place, and then you patch lots of code around you.
Yeah,
it's not the same. Like here, you subscribe to something explicitly, and it's sort of like calling a function. So I wouldn't call that AOP, but you can squint enough to see it as AOP too.
I will squint.
Maybe something I can add on that topic is that we are currently working on some automated conversion, mostly on the infrastructure side, to convert annotation stuff to functional stuff. That's currently just R&D work, but feel free to have a look to the Spring Init project that we have. We are trying to make bridges between the two worlds because, I guess, we will see in the future, but we have some ongoing work on that.
Sounds really cool.
Thanks.
So thank you all. I think with this interesting discussion, we're very close to finish our panel. I have one last question from our audience, from Razvan. I see a lot of guitars in background. Any Kotlin band in the works? Hadi, Vlad?
Not now, I think.
Oh, Andre, I think, also has a guitar.
My guitar out to join the club.
And there is actually kind of related question. Can we hope to see more events from the Kotlin team? So probably we can have some guitar playing from the Kotlin team.
Songs about Kotlin.
Yes, probably about Kotlin.
So we've already committed to make releases more often, like twice a year. Should we commit making events like this more often? I frankly don't know.
No, we shouldn't commit to making events, but probably to play some guitar.
We can have music videos about our releases.
Oh, you know, if these events allow me to see you in so many different backgrounds, I'm all for it.
Yeah, there was actually a question from I think the other day, like when Roman, how Roman chooses his backgrounds.
Randomly,
he moved from room to room, right?
No, just I use actually Unsplash. No, I use actually Unsplash, a really good site for looking for free pictures. I mean, really love it.
Okay, so thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for the speakers. I think that now we're finishing our event. So bye, everyone. Afterwards, yeah,
bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.
So afterwards.
Okay, we are live now again.
Yeah, we're back. We're back. We forgot. We had to do something. We promised you something. You know, we promised and we have to do it afterwards. And the thing is, like, we need to choose the winner for best question. And I think that we have something in the channel. So I can nominate. As I've learned, we have three mugs, 3 winners. So let's see what questions have caused the most interesting, kind of interesting discussion afterwards. So let's see, where are they? Personally, I like the question, how you see Kotlin after 3 years? It's like an interview question, but it makes you think of, okay, what to expect, what's there, what will be there.
Well, for me, it's a question: why it's only 3 years? Why not 5 and 10?
Yeah, but we can ask then. Then I think the question about DSL or annotations, the last one, let's nominate it because it was
that was a very good one.
Yeah, it was a good one, and we had an interesting discussion around it. And let's also nominate a question from the very last of our broadcast, because thank you, people, for being with us for so long. I don't know how you survived it, because it was hard.
How you cope with us speaking to you online all the time.
So long. So thank you. And I think we'll nominate also the question, how would you sell Kotlin for conservative people? So this one is from Artem Tushkin, the one about yourself from Roman Aksenov, and the question about interview is from Hamza Gatal. So please get in touch with us and we'll send you a mug for these questions. And for the beginning, just to remind you that you can watch the talks and solve the quizzes until the end of October 26th. Oh, okay. No, of course you can watch all the talks even afterwards, but they get immediately published on YouTube, so where you can find everything. You can rewatch the talks and check what you probably missed. But the deadline for the quizzes is October 27. So at this date, we'll announce who wins, who are the winner for our quiz quest and who gets the prizes.
So thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you so much, and see you at future conferences, at Kotlin Slack, on Twitter, and whenever else we can meet. So see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.